So we'll return out of closed session, and for a report out of closed session.
We had a discussion and a unanimous agreement on a stipulated agreement I have with a student. We talked about labor negotiations, and we kind of postponed a little bit the talk on my eval.
Correct. We'll pick that up at the next meeting. We got a spare pen I can steal for duration. And so we have a 2019-20 budget reserve substantiation to add to the budget, or add to the agenda, and it would go right after the approval of the budget, which is
item F. If we can just can we just call this like item F1?
Sure.
FA.
Absolutely.
Or FA?
Yeah. No problem. It's definitely related to the budget.
Gotcha. And it's a, is it a roll call?
I don't think so.
It's not a resolution.
Okay. So I'd like to entertain a motion to revise the budget. Revise the agenda, excuse me.
I'll move to revise the agenda as stated.
A second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we'll adjust the agenda. So we are now at, we mean to flag, or to open session, and if I can have Mr. Colbert lead the flag session.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We've done the report of closed session. We have the MCOE review of our budget. Paul, you said you had some questions?
Yeah.
Comments?
I don't have a problem with the first four. I had some questions between 5, 6, 7, and 8. They're like one thing questions.
No,
They're on the
this is,
public.
we're doing the review of the MCOE.
Oh, I'm sorry, this that I had a question, I was ahead of myself. Yeah, I just had some concerns about where it talks about how we've gone from well, it says here, the uncertainty, reserve of economic uncertainty, for economic uncertainty is 3%. They recommend that we keep building on that, and currently it's at 15, although it may drop to 14. And I'm not certain that that's the best plan if we're coming into times where there aren't sufficient funds, where there's the possibility of a recession. I continue to believe that when there is some serious emergency of some sort within a school district, the state takes care of it. That if we continue to put money aside, then the children that money comes into the district for don't get their fair share. They don't get the things that they require. I just don't think that it's that great of an idea to strive toward the 17% or whatever is the goal for the district as a reserve, instead of maintaining the 3% and using the rest of the money on things that are important for our students.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Uh-huh.
What is it that you mean by when something happens, the state deals with it?
Well, what I've known about in the past has been that if the boiler room explodes and we have to repair something, even the 15% isn't going to cover it. And so the state would come in, you sign up for those, I forget what they're called, but it's like a waiver to your financial obligation for repairing something that is just beyond your control.
So I just would like to respond to that by saying I'm not aware of any waivers that are available to us. There are specific hardship programs related to maintenance, but they still have very specific requirements. It's not automatic, it's never guaranteed, and it can be difficult to access. So I would feel very uncomfortable letting that be our contingency for dealing with emergencies. I would also like to say that 17% constitutes 2 months of operating expenditures, which is really not very much if the state begins deferring cash payments to a district and we have to continue making payroll and bills. So I just would like to say, to me, from a fiscal perspective and being prudent, and that 17% is what all of the fiscal agencies recommend.
Okay, and that could be, except that I noticed farther on down, we do transferring of funds in this district anyway, when the cash flow is bad. Used to be, we would maintain a 3% reserve, and during the years where the state was delayed in sending their payments, which I understand come rather regularly, just not always on time.
And I do have a cash flow that we can look at.
Oh,
related
good.
to that question.
But, and that's good, because that I would like to see, but it talks about how those end of the year transfers and the temporary cash flow that's low at this time of the year comes from other funds that have monies built in them. And that's where I would figure that the 2 months of covering our bills would come from, more so than from a 17 or a 15% reserve.
So most of the inter-fund that we do has more to do with the fact, for instance, that like our Fund 13 is our food service fund. We make over $200,000 of contribution into that annually. And so from a cash flow perspective, it does not maintain a lot of cash. And we don't make the final contribution until the end of the year. So that $200,000 or $250,000 that we put into it, it's not like we put it in at the beginning and now we're using it throughout the year. And so that's more what we're doing in terms of inter-fund transfers and those cash flows balancing out, is really the general fund is balancing those other funds. It's not that we have a lot of extra funds extraneous to the general fund to balance the general fund. So,
You don't close it, well, it's down to, you don't close out the year with any fund balances in the negative. None of those accounts are in the negative.
right.
You transfer money
On June 30th, and so there are times, for instance, because we're not closing the books until August or September or something. So if the Child Development Fund or the Food Service Fund needs cash temporarily to show a positive balance, that happens on June 30th, and then they immediately reverse, or something like that, just to keep from having a negative balance at year end.
We talked about this last meeting. I explained what fund balance really is. Fund balance means if we spend this budget the way we intend to spend it, at the end of the year, this is the amount of cash left over.
And so the other comment I'd like to offer a little bit of a rebuttal with respect to the reserve. All things being equal in a perfect system, you're right, a 3% reserve would be perfectly adequate. We could rely on the state to quote unquote bail us out anytime we, for whatever happened, whether it was a massive expense for a boiler or whatever the case may be. But roll back the clock to 2008 when we had a significant recession that lasted for several years. We ended up with much higher, we had a higher class number of kids in classrooms. We weren't able to offer raises for a long period of time. That reserve for economic uncertainty is there to help us get past a certain point. Don't forget also that, when March rolls around and we commit to the number of teachers that we're going to have for the following year, and then the recession hits, all of a sudden the state's holding back money. We can't just lay off teachers now. We own those people throughout the course of the year. And unfortunately, those expenses are things we can't get away from. So our ability to respond to a recession is limited, especially in those circumstances. We need those reserves to be able to weather some of those storms. Obviously, if the idea would be that if you have an adequate reserve and the recession only lasts for a couple of years, theoretically you don't have to change a whole lot what you're doing in order to get past that recession.
And you play down that 15%
Yeah,
to the
you
3%.
spend that down
so
while
that it's-
you're waiting for the recession to come to an end, and
Okay.
hopefully things get better. If you take a look at our district's financial position right now, it's tenuous at best, in my opinion, because we are still trying to provide all of the services that we need, keep the class sizes where we want them to be, provide the best services we can to all these kids, and still be in a position where when the economy does turn around, just like what unfortunately a number of economists, even ours, education is suggesting is on the horizon, we want to be prepared for it. And having a 3% reserve is not being prepared for it. It's just that simple.
Well,
At my
what's-
admin meeting, I went around the table and I pointed at each one of the principals and said, yes, I know you want this teacher. I know you want more paras. I know you want I know you want a culinary teacher, Mike. Yes, I know you want all those things. But we can't do that and continue to give raises and pay for health care and fix the facility at the same time. So, to the best of my knowledge, we're not hiring anybody who's not doing their job or we don't need. And so, when you look at our budget, I think we're running pretty tight on staff. I would hate to see us jeopardize class size or programs, because that's what happens. And in regards to the facility, I was in Sacramento yesterday for the facilities boot camp for small districts. The good news is, they were really polite people. The bad news is, we qualify for nothing. Even the new kindergarten funding for all-day kindergarten, because we already do the right thing and have all-day kindergarten, sorry, you don't qualify. Because I was going to apply for that and knock down the whole side of the west wing of Brookside and put in kindergarten classrooms that are real kindergarten classrooms. Sorry, you don't qualify. I said to the lady who does the hardship program, I sat with her at lunch and said, what am I going to do when somebody walks in my high school science wing and makes a Williams claim for the environment? Because they could. And she said, well, you have to fix it. I said, I don't have the money to fix it. I don't have $800,000 to gut the science wing and put a new one in. Well, you'd have to pass a bond issue. I said,
It was $3.4 million.
I said, have you been to Willits and talked about bond issue before? Because the B word is not what it is in other places. The B word here is bond. And I said, those are the issues that I'm dealing with. Every single modernization tag, because when a building gets 25 years old and then 30 years old, the state grants a modernization tag for it. The last bond issue used every single tag we had. Even though those stuff didn't get fixed or touched, the tag got used. So at the end of this year, there are a modernization, and oddly enough, they don't do it on buildings, they do it on parts of buildings. It is the high school auditorium, the high school cafeteria, and Blosser, because Blosser just had its 30th birthday. Those three are the only ones that come up for modernization.
Those are matching.
Those are a 60-40 match. They are 3.5 years behind in processing those claims. So even if we qualify, and by the way, we have the paperwork already in saying as soon as it comes up, sign me up. We want to be on this list. They're 3.5 years out on that. So the good, the bad, the ugly is we've done what we can do. But the state's not bailing us out when we have a facility issue. And I could take our entire fund balance and not have enough money to fund our 4 biggest projects. Just materials. I'm not talking about people. We have 6 classrooms at Blosser. 3 of them are condemned. The other 3 we are duct taping together. Those old portables were 50 plus years old.
You mean Brooks?
At Brookside,
Oh,
at Brookside, those are 50 years old, and they probably bought them used. They need to go. The high school has a Titanic's boiler. It's going to go. The high school parking lot is blown apart. Blosser's roof's gotta get fixed, or we'll start to incur lots of internal damage at that building from the roof. Those are 4 projects that even if I used Paula's scenario and said, I'm gonna fix them all tomorrow with our fund balance, I'm gonna spend all our fund balance, and then I'd have to hire a business manager too, but but I don't even have the money to buy the materials to do those. I mean, we're not gonna wish and hope on it. If something happened dramatic, my guess is they would say, well, shut the high school main building down and get some portables. That's probably what the solution would be.
Let's hope we don't have to go there.
Yeah, and we're trying. We're doing everything we can to keep everything running. But again, we've got what we got. And it's not the building that makes the education. It's the kids and the teachers. And so we're keeping our focus there, and we're duct taping and super gluing as best we can to keep it going.
Any other discussion on the information letter from the county?
Yeah, thanks.
Can I express my disgust that the county gets to tell us that?
Yeah.
They're supposed to be responsible in the final analysis if this district doesn't keep their head above water anyway, right?
Yeah, well, good luck with that one.
Well, I know, but I mean, that's supposed to be.
In the audience, can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize for coming in late. I just was curious about what is the reserve, the current reserve at this point? The
I didn't look at
percentage?
the number.
Well, we have items on the agenda later that will go into further detail if you are still going to be here, or?
Can you just give me a ballpark or over the 3%? That's just all I'm asking.
We have, I don't have it as a percentage, I just have the dollars.
The dollars.
Yeah, so, we have, the minimum reserve for 1920 would be 610,742.
That's the 3%, right?
And we have in total unassigned 2,128,000.
Okay.
And just an example, like I said at the last board meeting, with cash flow, we did a pay on May 30. We only do 11 of them. It's over $1 million when we do a pay. 4 days later, we processed a second payroll for the end of the year, over $1 million. We had to have more than $2 million sitting there in order to make those 2 payrolls.
And I should also point out that deficit spending and reserves, the second interim budget projects deficit spending in the unrestricted fund in each of the current and 2 subsequent years with a total unrestricted deficit spending of $763,362 over the 3-year period. So unless something changes, that reserve is going to get dramatically reduced over the next 2 years regardless.
Unless we get a state increase, we're going to significantly hammer our reserve. But we knew that when we negotiated contracts.
Right, yeah.
Because that was a part of the statement was.
I should also point out that if you take a look at what's been going on around the state, there's a lot of pressure in Sacramento to fix K-12 funding. We've come out and said very publicly right here that K-12 funding is ridiculous in California. We're like ranked in some places considered as high as like 40, as low as 46, and as high as 37. But it's in a state that's got the 5th largest economy in the world. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But you take a look at LA and Oakland, they signed contracts with their teachers unions that they publicly came out and said they can't afford in order to get those teachers back in the classrooms. They've actually came out and said that they will be bankrupt in 3 years because of those contracts. So the state, somebody's going to have to move forward, we hope. So, and we're kind of banking on a certain amount of that occurring. So, anything further? Board comments. We'll start with Paula.
Well, I always have board comments, but it's only been a week since the last time, so I don't have anything to say in particular except that I have questions on the coming agenda and I'll bring those up when I show.
Jeannie?
Well, it's been a week since our last board meeting, but I guess my only comment is in regards to Mark. I wasn't on the board when he was hired, but I said this to the board in closed session, is that Mark said that he got hired with a clear understanding that the board expected him to take care of what our problems were, to do something about them. And my observation about Mark is he's not sitting twiddling his thumbs. He's actively looking for solutions to what ails Willits Unified, and I really appreciate that. So.
Robert?
Well, I'll have to say one thing about Mark. He swings for the fences. And he has a comment he always came back with, and it was self-deprecating, but I'm bringing it up. You know, I just want to say, show my appreciation to all of our staff that's working over the summer. I know a lot of our staff works really hard they get the duct tape out and the super glue, and they get things put together for us so that we're ready to go the next year. And it's not always fun working out in that heat, but I appreciate them, all the work they do over the summer to get ready, as well as our district staff. There's a lot of work that goes on at the district level that people don't see because school's out, but there's a lot of work in our HR department, wrapping things up, opening things up, and so I appreciate all the work you put in over the summer. School's not out for you.
Yep.
I wish I had duct tape.
Back from vacation, a great time. Hopefully we can make things continue to move forward here. I appreciate all the hard work that's put in by everyone here, the staff, the administration, teachers. Hopefully the teachers get some great vacation time this summer and come back really invigorated and ready to help things out with those kids. Robert?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up. I'd just like to thank all of the employees of Willits Unified School District. I think we had a great year. And again, the graduations we attended 2 weeks ago were just really represented the hard work that everybody's been doing from TK all the way up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that this year.
We didn't have CSEA and WTA's comment. Was that because it's school's out, or?
Well, normally on this second meeting, we don't do board or soup comments,
But you guys are here.
I think the only thing I would add is I really appreciated being able to do the Unlocking the Code preview and getting to talk with Trish about what didn't work, what we need to fix, and coming up with some solutions with our principals. And I think we're gonna be able to do it differently next year and be better with it and see the progress that we want. So I felt really good about that. So thank you for bringing her.
It's a nice end of the year review, and now that you've done it once.
And now I can start talking to people and we'll have chances to, yeah.
Jen, I think you're the only CSEA.
You just put on the record that Dan's not here.
Expired.
No.
Hey, I'm on the board too.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Sorry, Richard. I forgot you're not just the cameraman.
I wouldn't be here if I was doing this.
You got it. I just want to tell you some of the summer stuff that we're working on. We did have a great session with Trish Martin. She came, we went through all our Dibble data. She gave the folks there a nice preview of what we've done, where we need to go, and how to get there. So I feel really good about that. I also am working on a lot of summer projects, one of which is to get water out to that field behind the press box. That's going to get hydro-seeded, and we have to be able to put water down on it. And so I'm working on that. because it's been all volunteer to put that entire field together. And when we get hydro seed down on it, a year from this fall, we'll have the practice field we've never had, so we stop tearing up the current fields we have.
Is it possible to go out there and take a quick tour of that after the board meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
The other project I'm working on is obviously the barns out here. We're working with, in fact, they have a meeting tonight, the alumni FFA are meeting. There are 2 barns going out here that was money that was donated to us, and that entire area is gonna look really good, and the kids will have a great FFA farm in place, and I'm really pleased about where that's headed. One of the other projects we're working on this summer, besides fix and repair, you'll see that in the classrooms, we're going to do the floors for the classroom, but we're not going to do our crazy take it down to the earth and then put 58 coats of wax on it. We're going to focus this year on painting, fixing, cleaning. And for example, at Brookside, they're starting a paint job to go through the whole building. We really need to paint and make, I hate to say it, but a painted bad building looks better than an unpainted old building. And so we're going to try and spice it up with a little paint. The same thing needs to happen at Bechtel. One of the other projects that I'm working on is we are an evacuation center in case of a wildfire. Well, if PG&E pulls the plug for 4 days, we got to be ready to handle that. And so today I've met with the maintenance and tech and talked to Willits Power and the city. Our goal is to run a small generator to keep our technology running in here. Because if the technology running here, if the internet's up, we can keep it going in here if we have a small generator to keep our rack going of stuff. The other place we want to make sure we can go is we can go to the gym and use some LED rack lights, because you're going to need to light the gym up at night, because you can't have a evacuation center and have it pitch black. And then the big issue is looking at the high school cafeteria. We're a feeding evacuation center, and so we have to have a generator that has the horsepower to keep that kitchen up and running.
State surplus?
Well, Willits Power has an agreement with the city that they're working out. It's not done yet, but they pay like a monthly service fee to be within, I think it's a 12-hour notice. Within 12 hours, they can bring that piece of equipment in. And so we're looking at entering into that with them. The other ones, we can handle the gym, we can handle the technology on our own. We also have to keep a piece of technology running in the weight room area. That's where the fiber comes in, AT&T's fiber. Those are really small potatoes to keep going. For the gym area, I'm looking at a welder that you can also use as a generator. Because one of the things we don't have, a piece of equipment is, we don't have a portable welder. If we had one, we could use that as one of our emergency generations. So it's one of the things we need to prepare for, because when it happens, it's going to be spontaneous. And so we have a plan of, we have to move all of our frozen goods to the high school freezer. And we're going to have to go through the electrical work. So we have a switch. So you go into the box and you hit the kill switch, and there's another switch you turn on that runs just the circuits you want to run. And we have a dongle that we can plug into and get going. But we're an emergency evacuation center for the community, so we have to be able to do that. And the lighting, for example, if we use the auditorium, because I think we found out at the last time, the best place to meet in Willits with a big group is in the auditorium. And so we could move that lighting in there. It wouldn't be that difficult. But we're trying to do some disaster preparation on our part to be up and running. Now, there's no FEMA funds out there or anything because nothing's happened yet. And so we're trying to do some minimal expenses to be in place when that happens. the city's going through exactly the same thing. The city's spending some dollars to be ready, just as we're gonna have to spend some dollars to be ready.
Okay.
Other projects, there's a lot of summer stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff getting fixed. The property between Blosser and Bechtel, the city is in review now of, we've turned in the documents to ask that to be rezoned to R3. And so we're in that process, and it would be nice when they rezone it to R3, then we'll talk about, do we put it out to a developer, what do we want to do with it? But at least we'll have a piece of property that is saleable, usable, and could work for us. That might be the roof for Blosser in the parking lot of the high school. You know, I don't know what the cash value of that is. I just know we're not using it right now.
Never have.
Well, and let's be honest, we need money to fix our current facility. We're not building a new one. So,
Okay.
those are some of the summer things.
So fix and repair our roofs and most of the cooling and air, the air cycling systems, cooling and heating are taken care of?
Well, I'm going to use the word fix the roof we are repairing the roof.
Yeah.
Because what we actually do is you power wash it down,
Yeah,
and then you blow dry it with a big blower, and then you retar it.
okay.
And it's only certain roofs. You can't do that at Blosser. Blosser's a
No, they
shingle
have a
roof.
real roof, yeah.
But wherever we have our flat space roofs, actually all you really need to, if you go on Google Earth and look at the high school site, for example, you can see bright silver spots. That means the roofing's
There's
going.
no tar, yeah.
And so we're redoing those right now. They're redoing all the ones we can do.
So that's mostly Brookside and then spots at the high school?
It's Brookside, Bechtel, and the high school.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, it's Sanhedrin doesn't have that.
yeah.
Neither does Blosser, and neither does Sherwood. Sherwood doesn't need anything because the roofs are relatively new, but they have the same style of roof, but they're relatively new. But yeah, I think just the tar was like $25,000 or something for the materials. Yeah, it's pricey, but again, you fix buildings from the top down.
That's true.
So.
And the most that are getting painted is mostly Brookside on the inside?
Right now, it's Brookside. We want to see how the flow goes at Brookside. 'Cause-
There's a paint crew?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They'll just kind of go from site to site if it works out.
Yeah, they have a guy who does the painting, and the other two are ahead of him doing all the taping and laying
Yeah,
out.
okay.
And Justin sprays a room while they're taping the next. And then when they tape at the end of a run of like 4 rooms, they go back and they do the hallway. And so now he can come back and do the hallway.
Oh,
So
okay.
they're cruising along.
Yeah, oh, okay.
By the way, we're also taking out I don't even know what you call it. I think it was an old storage building at Brookside.
Oh, that one back by the fence,
Yeah, back by the fence.
behind those 3 portables?
Yeah.
4.
That could have been a biology experiment in there. Yikes.
Yeah,
It was bad.
it was for storage, but it always leaked and nothing ever,
Yeah.
it was just difficult to deal with.
Yeah, that is going by the wayside.
Oh, that's good.
Speaking about Brookside, what's the status of the tree issue?
Oh, thank you. The stuff has been cut, and what do you call the crew?
Marvin's group.
Arborist?
No, not Marvin's. Who's the cleanup
Davey?
crew? The inmates.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the,
Conservation.
Yeah.
Can't let me out. I don't know what they call them.
Marlin Forest or Timberland Forest?
Yeah.
probably Cal Fire.
Cal Fire's group.
Yeah.
They're going through and cleaning the area out. Guy went in there and supervised their cut, and they did the stuff. And he coordinated with them to come and do the clean out to save us some money.
Nice.
Once that gets done, then I'm gonna try and meet with that little Mill Creek group and ask them if they wanna become waterfront owners.
Okay, well, Doug, you know, the first guy that started things, was really happy with what had been done so far, and he seems to think he is a waterfront owner. He's not yet?
No,
Oh, okay.
Oh, no,
There's gotta be
he
some-
will be.
Well, okay, because
Yeah.
when I spoke with him, that's, he was telling me how great it was, that he's a
well, that
waterfront
require
and
property line
everything was taken
adjustment,
care of.
Yes, the
quick
city-
claim deeds.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, the city has a name for it when they do a major adjustment like that. Yeah, yeah. I think the district will buy everybody a kayak for their new waterfront park. Because we do not want to be responsible for that creek and the creek bed. We have zero use of that. I don't know why we ever got it, but we got it.
Are all the trees down now that were going to be an
The
issue or just
problematic
his?
trees are
All
down.
the problems?
Yeah, we went beyond Doug's. His is,
Oh, okay.
he's one of 13 properties.
Well, I knew that, yeah, it's just, he's the only one I see once in a while, and that's,
Right.
okay.
But when Alex went out there with me with Guy,
Oh, okay.
and we walked the entire line, and
It will be an ongoing issue for the district. Every few years, we will be investing significant amounts of money dealing with problem trees all through there. And we would be well advised to find a way to not have to deal with that.
in Mark's world, I spent 25 grand cutting trees in somebody else's backyard that has nothing to do with kids and
Yeah,
t-shirts.
yeah,
But I had no choice, it's our property.
yeah. Okay, well, I just heard it was completed, I'm glad it's
Yeah,
almost, but.
the cleanup is being done.
Yeah,
And Doug and the neighbors, Maddie's brother, is it, I think, lives next to him. We've been able to use their properties to access, so we don't have to haul it all the way across the creek, up the
Yeah.
hill to our property.
oh, that was good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the update. And we are down to item 12A, is public comment on the consent agenda. And then we have the consent agenda, and I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Once we have that motion in place, we'll discuss it.
I'll move to approve it.
I'll second.
Okay, so discussion on items 1 through 13 in the consent agenda. Paula, do you have some concerns there?
I did, I have a question on number 5, and the personal illness and injury, that
Yep.
was one of them.
Read it?
Yep. So if you're there, the only thing I was curious about is, it says that the new law requires that regardless of the type of differential pay system used by the district, employees must receive at least 50% of their regular salary for any portion of the 12-week parental leave that remains following the exhaustion of sick leave. So what I was curious about is, if we have someone who's used their sick leave, okay, okay.
This is specific to the parental
Right,
issue.
okay, so that means that you're either adopting or you're having a child or whatever, right?
They
Isn't that
still
what
get
this one
50% of
is?
their paycheck, even though they've exhausted all of their sick leave.
And that includes their differential pay, or is that what we're making
That
sure?
is the difference. So I think that the only thing that's changed, I don't think it changes the timelines or anything like that. My
Oh, okay.
understanding is that right now, the differential pay is, there's two components of that. There's the differential pay period, so you're entitled to that for
100 days.
the certain number of
Yeah.
days. And if you have sick leave still happening for classified, I believe that runs concurrently. And then if you were at some point during that period to run out of the sick leave, now you literally are getting paid the differential between the cost of the sub and your salary. So in other words,
Okay,
so that's what differential is referring to. It's the differential between the cost of a sub and your normal salary.
right.
And for certificated, I believe that those actually stack on top of each other. So when Linda's the expert on that. But
Yeah, because the 5-month leave, the 100 days, that doesn't happen concurrent with your sick days. That happens
For
after
cer-
for classified, at least according to another policy that's in here, further down the.
I'm not sure I'm comfortable being the definitive answer on that just because
Okay.
Linda is the expert at that. But I feel like my understanding has been that the laws regarding classified and certificated are not the same. And so certain things run concurrently for one group and certain things stack on each other for the other group, and I don't remember which way that goes.
Okay.
My understanding though is that this particular law change isn't changing any of that stuff, but what it is saying is that, let's say normally the differential pay, the amount that we would dock for the substitute and what you're gonna get, what's left that you would get paid, is less than 50% of your normal pay.
Okay.
You will still get 50% of your normal pay.
And
that's
For
the
those
only-
12 weeks.
For that
Right.
period of time.
And so that's
Correct.
where my question starts.
So I think that's really what's changing, is just how much of your pay will you get during that period of time.
Okay, and so now that the law is going to say that you're going to get 50% of it, whether there's that much there or not, how does that get like reimbursed down the line? Or is it just the district pays the
Pays more.
50% and that's the way that works
We
out?
pay
More
more,
for the district.
that's the bottom line.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because this is considerably different than a couple more that come on further down. And that further down it'll talk about where they stack and
And
where
this
they
is
don't. But I just
specific
wondered where
to-
the additional came from. Or did the, I mean, there.
Just goes into our budget.
Oh, okay, because in the past, the district had an option, I guess, because I know that they did it, to take from the employee to balance out what they had reimbursed when it was over what they thought needed to be reimbursed. And I know that that's a little different, but I didn't know if this was going to be the same type of plan. But it's not. Oh, okay.
This is just for parental leave too.
Right,
Right,
It's not
for others.
differential in
for other
general.
reasons, exactly, but just for that. Oh, okay.
On
and
a
the district
parental
will pick it
leave,
up.
you're never gonna get less than 50% of your differential.
Oh, okay, and the district will cover whatever that extra.
We're gonna have to cover whatever that
It's not funded by
overage
the
is.
state.
Right.
There's no
Oh,
program
okay.
associated with it.
Oh, okay, well, that was my only question. And then there's personal illness and injury leave is the next one. And that's the, and that's where it does talk about that and it says for a certificated employee, and then later it talks about a classified employee. And it does make it clear that the times are you use all that you have, sick leave and everything, and then you go on the part about the differential for 100 days, and after that, you go on the part about a 39-month waiting period.
Right, so if you have not
Okay,
been,
so I just wanted to,
if you haven't been released to work
From
by
the-
the end of the differential period, then you go on the that 39-month rehire list.
okay, and that happened, I know last year there was concern about when that happened, and so now this makes it really clear, but I didn't see where it said, this is a new rule. I merely saw it where it was talking about how it was in ed code and everything else, and I sort of didn't know exactly why it was coming up now. And so I wanted to know.
So you also have 12-month employees who are
Right.
CSEA and 9-month with teachers.
Right, or,
And so you always have that issue about that.
Both of these are simply making adjustments for the new law, AB 2012, that speaks to the 12-month parental leave. You're never going to receive less than half of your salary during that period of time once you've exhausted your sick leave, your
okay.
accrued leave. So both of these are speaking primarily to
To the
that.
same thing, right there?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I just needed to be sure.
The changes to both of these are related to that new law that speaks about making sure you're going to receive at least 50% of your salary during that 12-week period,
Right,
regardless of whether you've exhausted your sick leave or not.
right, and the other ones are talking about a standard illness, right?
So basically,
Or
assume for the sake of
emergency
argument that you've got
surgery.
plenty of sick leave on the books. You could get
It really
your
doesn't
full
affect
salary throughout the whole time.
Yeah,
On the other hand, if you've only got enough sick leave to get you through 6 weeks, you'll get full salary for 6 weeks, and the last 6 weeks, you'll get at least 50%.
well, kind of what struck me is it doesn't talk about disability or workers' comp or anything like those. And
Well,
I
it
didn't
actually
know if
does,
those were- Well,
but
I
they're,
didn't- oh, okay, I didn't see that.
they're essentially unrelated issues.
Oh,
If you're a
okay,
workers' comp,
because one the state will take care of.
yes.
Okay, okay, this is just district responsibility, I must have mixed them up. And then it talks about the inter-district attendance. I know that was something that Mark told us that he was not going to necessarily blatantly agree to switching, and so that doesn't affect any of that thought. It just says that when you leave one district and go to another, that you don't really have to take someone back or you don't really have to let them go depending on the circumstances? I mean, that's kind of what I got out of there, and I wondered,
Well, if I deny an inter-district transfer, they always have the option of going to the county.
right, who can or can't overturn your decision, right? Isn't that the way that works? Oh, okay, that's, I
I
wondered.
mean,
Okay, well, I didn't get that out of there either. And then withholding the grades and the diploma and the transcripts, it keeps saying except for homeless or foster youth or something. And that's because they have a different set of rules regardless, right?
they have homeless and foster have not only different graduation, they
Yeah.
have a whole different set of rules.
Okay, that's,
And we
that's what it
actually had
alluded
that
to.
scenario this year. We have a foster place gal who graduated. And so she graduated under a whole different set of criteria.
okay, and it also talks about homeless students. So do we still do McKinley or whatever?
McKinney, Vinton.
Oh, okay.
We have gotten a very small amount of funding through the county office the last few years. That program, I mean, I think $1,000 a year or something is all that we get for that. So it's generally used to provide basic, needs for students. But we don't, I think in the past this district got maybe its own grant or a larger amount.
There was a grant at one
Yeah.
time, but that's not there anymore, right?
Correct.
Right.
Oh, okay, so when you're homeless now, you have to go to the office and claim that you are homeless?
So there are very specific definitions of homeless. They involve sometimes things like double occupancy of homes in certain cases, or, so it's not, there's a lot of ways of child meeting that definition. And we have been providing training and support to our site staff to help them understand those definitions and to help them sort of elicit that information from students and families in a sensitive way so that we can connect them with resources when needed and make sure that they're correctly identified in our system.
And so if a family becomes homeless or through some disaster, their house falls apart and they end up in a trailer or whatever on their property, but it's small and whatever, they need to wait when the school starts, go to the administration, and they fit under this?
I think that they can
Anytime.
notify the school
Anytime.
site at any time during the year. But
Oh,
what
okay.
happens in terms of our reporting to the state, if a student is identified as homeless at the census day in the beginning of the year, it's in October, I think, then they are qualified under that definition for the remainder of the year,
Right.
correct? But it doesn't bar them from entering that status later in the year.
Oh, okay, okay.
And we may not be able to report it as such, but they certainly are still, allowed to have access to resources as needed.
Okay.
And when they become, we usually find out through staff
Yeah.
or a parent. And for example, inter-district transfer doesn't apply to a homeless student. If we have a child who became homeless and for some reason was living in Ukiah, they can still come to Willits and it's not considered an inter-district transfer.
Oh, okay.
It was their school of attendance prior to, and they're welcome to stay at their home school regardless of because they became homeless. Now, if the family moves there, that's different. But if they became homeless and their shelter, for example, or their new placement was in Ukiah, they bypass the inter-district transfer.
Oh, okay. This was just a big concern because of what they did with Paradise for Durham and for Chico and around there, and how they seem to handle that really nicely from what I learned.
Right.
But anyway, I was just curious, so it applies to here just exactly the same way, basically.
Yeah, we actually had a
Okay.
student here from Paradise who
Oh,
came
okay.
and she was considered homeless and she got all the benefits, I hate to say benefits, but
Yeah.
she was entitled to all the things we could do for her through that.
Oh, okay.
And, it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I thought so. I just never had seen it set up. I didn't know that was the case. Okay, then my other concern is just on head lice, that this deal with nits not really counting. We know that nits are eggs, right? I mean, okay.
They
Nobody over here made
They
this
count
rule. I'm
these
just
at
saying.
home. they count to be sent home the first time.
Right, and then
And
theoretically
once
you
they're
get treated.
once a parent comes in and says, I've treated my child,
Uh-huh.
and they
Right.
check them and there's no active louse, then they are admitted back in.
Okay, well that,
Otherwise, we'd have students, as you know, you worked at
Well,
Brookside, they'd be out
exactly.
for months and months and
and
months.
that's exactly true, but at the same time, we're sort of offering to infect all the neighboring
The
students.
county, not the county office, the county health department does not consider it,
Needs to be a,
just like with pink eye, they don't consider
yeah, I know
that.
that you came back to some.
Yeah, the reason.
Okay, I didn't
No.
understand that one. All righty, then I'm done with my questions. Thank you. Those things just didn't add up.
Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes. Approval of the revised 2019-20 school calendar. Accept a motion to accept the school calendar for 2019-20.
I have some public comment on that.
We'll get there in a moment.
I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have some discussion. Approval of the revised 2019-20 school calendar. Significant changes, Mike?
The significant change is minimum day Tuesdays. We have not quite half as many, but we have less. And the rationale is pretty simple. We added a professional development day. And we need more instructional time. I know I've talked with some of the board members, and several of you would just like us to have 0 minimum days and increase instructional hours. I mean, my job is to help us get to where we need to be, and time on task is a big factor. And so adding the professional development day in negotiations, I mean, we were pretty serious about that we gave a significant change to make that happen. And time on task is important. I met with all of the administrators and we went through the calendar. This is a district calendar. There's no minimum day at Brookside, but not at the high school, or middle school, not at the elementary. One of the changes in October, generally speaking, conferences really have been K-5. Middle school's been somewhat off and on. These are K-12 conferences. I'm expecting high school to have conferences as well. Those parents need to be given the opportunity to be brought in, talk about what's working and not working with their child as well. So that is a district conference week. The only unique change on some Mondays, or instead of a Tuesday, you'll see a Thursday, Friday, and there are 3 of them in the year. Those correspond to the end of a trimester because high school goes into a exam mode where they have exams. And so in K-5, we'll be able to use those times for meetings and going over data, which according to their admins is the perfect time because we do DIVLs 3 times a year. That's the good time to have some PD time to go through the data. And so what I tried to do was get everybody on the same page, on the same calendar. And nobody's ever happy about calendar. I had a parent go, well, I like when it's every Tuesday. Well, I understand that. I also talk to a lot of parents who say, could you please not do any Tuesdays? So I can't make everybody happy. So what I wanted to do is make sure we're using the Tuesdays we have, and they're in a place where it works for what we have planned to do. And so that's kind of the gist of the calendar.
Thank you.
Who controls the agenda of those Tuesdays? Who controls the agenda of those?
Administrators, site administrators. Because Mike and Maria, for example, determine which ones they're going to use for joint collaboration between middle school, high school, because we have to do some of that. At Brookside, they do a good job of determining what they're doing on all those Tuesdays. At Bechtel, they do the same. They use those Tuesdays, the site administrator uses those and coordinates what goes on.
Any further?
So has there ever been any discussion to, on the short Tuesdays, to have them regular length day and then reimburse the teachers for having meetings beyond the professionals today?
Yeah, it was one of my contract proposals, was to use that. We have a, I don't know what it is, it's somewhere in the contract, it's $34 an hour or something, to use those in lieu of Tuesdays. At some point, you know, one of the ways to help us is to give more time on task. This is not an uncommon scenario. There are a lot of Lake County schools. St. Helena uses 2 a month. I mean, at some point we have to make a decision on instructional time.
But, yeah, there still needs to be collaboration between the teachers.
Sure.
And we certainly want to be able to provide either the time or reimbursement for that time.
Right.
One or the other, or both in some cases.
We have to pay or use instructional time. I mean, there aren't 3 options, there's only 2.
Well, in consideration, when we compare ourselves to the charters, you know, an extra 100 hours of instructional time by the charters appears to pay off for them.
Yeah.
There were some questions from the field.
Yeah, I'd like to, can I speak?
Certainly.
I'm Lisa May. I teach 4th grade at Blosser Lane. I've had 25 years of experience teaching, and I have big concerns about this calendar. And I hear what you're saying about time on task. And however, there is zero, I repeat, zero research that supports seat time correlating to student achievement. And actually, there is a huge body of information about teacher collaboration and student achievement. I understand we're going into our 2nd year with Unlocking the Code. It was a big undertaking for Blosser Lane teachers this last year. And without our Tuesday meetings to really discuss, you know, understanding what was needed for that program to be successful, I don't know that my team would have been able to do it. I just can't emphasize enough how much teacher collaboration is important. And this cuts it in half. It also makes it so that those times when we would meet and look over data for Unlocking the Code would be filled up with staff meetings and other types of meetings. I mean, that's the bane of the teacher's existence is meetings, but they're so essential. That's what makes the difference with student achievement. If you look at the countries that we compete with, it's not about seat time. It's about teacher collaboration. Sweden, Norway, Finland, all the countries that come up in research, it's all about teacher collaboration. I also want to add that this calendar is not, I mean, really what we should need to do, I'm sorry, I get a little very impassioned. We need to do what's best for kids, absolutely. Time on task, I start teaching from the moment those kids arrive. I wasn't given an opportunity to talk about the early start time this last year. I lost a good half hour every morning because of so many students coming in late. And, you know, I wasn't consulted about the early start time, and that was just happened. And, I mean, I can't teach them if they're not there. So there's a lot of things that are happening that are interfering with time on task. The other issue is, you know, Mark, I have to say, I don't think you had any input from staff on this calendar. And considering things like having a 5-day week the first week, for those little tiny, you know, 4 and 5-year-olds, that's hell. That's really hard to put them in a classroom for 5 days in the heat of August, you know, their first experience of school. That's not student friendly. I just don't think this calendar is really what's best for kids. And I'm very concerned about that. I wish that staff had some input about the calendar, because, you know, we've been doing this. I've been doing this for a quarter of a century. I know what works with kids. I'm in that classroom with those kids every day. Teacher input is valuable, and that's what this calendar is really missing. Thank you for listening.
Mark, are they collaborating at all during their PE time? Do they have any collaboration time?
Depends on the building, it depends on the date. Kathleen sets out schedules. Nancy and Kathleen deal with it differently.
Just curious.
Well, it didn't, in the past, always the calendars went through the association. Teachers were given an opportunity to vote on particular calendar types, and then those were brought to the board and to the superintendent to make, actually, they weren't really brought to us, but I mean, they were supposed to be, you didn't get anything like that?
From what I've been told is that my role is to do the calendar.
I do want to interrupt, or if I can just say that this calendar, the 1920 calendar, was approved before. This is a revised. That 1920 calendar, when we picked August 19th and all of that, yes, it went through WTA.
Okay, so then the revisions didn't, is that what you're trying to say?
This revised was just put together because of after negotiations and needing to add a PD day to the calendar.
And I've been in 2 different districts, so I hope I'm not thinking of the other district I was in, but I seem to remember that some contract language about their specific aspects of the calendar are subject to approval. So like first and last day, things like that, but not necessarily like bell schedules and that.
Not bell schedules is not in the current contract that I know about, but I do know that days for PD before the school starts or after school, how they need to
Some
be
of those,
touching one another.
some of those
you
that
know.
are, yes. And
Those are all the same.
Okay, so then the issues are strictly that they are minimum days now, or where they're being placed? Am I,
Less minimum days.
well, I'm aware that there are less, but,
And then I think what Lisa brought up too about having a full day, just a full week, that first week of school
yeah,
when
that
we
gets
return,
crazy, but.
with
okay.
no minimum day, I mean, that's a tough one. And I thought Lisa made a really good point about that.
That's not the case for kindergarten, by the way.
Okay.
Kinder's half day for the
Well,
first
it's
2
still,
weeks.
it's still that 5-day week. It's just, it's a long,
6 years old.
And no minimum day off week.
and they haven't been in school, you know, they've been in a more relaxed situation.
Yeah, that's gonna be tough.
Okay, well,
I'm Amy Grooms and I teach 4th grade. It will be my 5th year here. I went to school there and I believe we always had minimum days too. Ukiah does it the same, 1 minimum day a week. It's simple. You know, every Wednesday in Ukiah you are out early. In Willits, you know, every Tuesday you're out early. Kids don't have to wonder what's happening today because it's Tuesday. The new calendar, yes, was approved on the website. It was downloaded. I handed it out to all my students. All of a sudden, I get an email, this is the new calendar that's going to be on the agenda, which was a week ago or something. So my question would be, when do parents, I know we did a survey, or maybe Mark, you did a survey a year ago, the end of the, not last year, the end of the 2018 year, there was a survey, and on the survey it asked, would you want to get rid of minimum days to the parents? And I believe the outcome of that survey was no, but we might want to see it again, because I believe the consensus was the majority of Willits parents said no. So with the new calendar, we have every other Tuesday as minimum day. I don't know what our special needs department kids are going to do with every other Tuesday. I know they have set up text schedules that make it easy for them so that when they go to school, they know when they look at their daily calendar, it's easier. But to be able to figure out that this week I'm out early, next week I'm not, it's just, it's not consistent. It's not easy for kids. It's not easy for parents. If we're going to pick a day of the week, Friday, I don't know. But it needs to be consistent each day of the week, like this day you're out early. I don't know if you have, maybe we need to add a day to the calendar. If we're not able to fit in all of these hours that we need, do we need to add another day to the calendar? But I have a family at home that, you know, as teachers, you spend a lot of time in the classroom outside your contracted day. I want to be home with my family. I don't want to be paid $34 extra a day to be at a meeting. I want to be planning for next day for free if I need to. I want it put in my day, and it just needs to be consistent. And then the other question is, are we going to ask parents what they think? This is the calendar, it's going to be approved in 2 months from now. The minimum days are changing. Please come, voice your opinions. Did we ask?
Here's my question.
Yeah.
Okay. I realize it's easier for your life to have every Tuesday an hour and a half less
As a
instructional
parent, it
time.
is, yeah.
As a teacher too.
Yeah.
It'll be easier on both.
Mhm.
We need instructional time, okay? I don't know what Lisa's referring to in data. I don't know where that's coming from.
It's evidence-based
No,
research.
my turn. Sorry. You're evidence-based. All you gotta do is look across town. They have 125 more hours of instruction in their elementary than we do,
Demographic.
okay?
Where are you
125
talking
at the charter.
Okay,
Their
then what's
days
the,
40 minutes longer every day,
Okay.
and they don't do minimum days. They have 125 more hours of instruction. Now, if you're gonna tell me that doesn't make a difference, are you telling me?
I didn't tell you it doesn't make
That
a
was
difference,
Lisa's
but
point, was that it didn't make a difference.
I do understand that where she's coming from, that data does speak very loud. And so if we found data online that can prove it, I think that's substantial. But what I'm saying is, I do know when my students come in 4th grade at 9 years old, they don't even know when to use the bathroom because they're used to going to the bathroom at any time they want. There's all this retraining. And it is very hard for them to go a full day and the next day do another full day and 5 days to work into it. So Tuesdays, having a Tuesday after the first day, the week of the school, did help them cope. I mean, it's a lot. And it doesn't mean that, I think that parents should have some input on it or be able to voice an opinion. I value my parents in my class, and I value their opinions on my teaching. And I think teachers should also be valued as well. And I don't think that we're valued to be asked, what do you think? Yes, administrators sat and looked at the calendar, but I was kind of blindsided by it. I have to figure out where my daughter's going on those other days, and I have plans for the Tuesdays, and I have to figure it all out. She does not go to Kids Club because Kids Club it's full. A lot of times there's a waiting list. There's a lot of kids that want to get into Kids Club but can't. So that's not always an option for all parents. So we do have to figure out where they're going, and those kids that go on the bus home, I know there's a lot to figure out. And parents forget to pick up their kids on the Tuesdays.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be an office issue and babysitting issue in the office on every Tuesday because parents aren't going to know which Tuesday is which and what day they need to pick up their kid early. It's very difficult.
I did want to say that the calendar was posted on Facebook the last couple of days with, by parents
Okay.
saying that this was coming before the board, and if parents had issues with it, that the minimum day was going to be every other week. If parents had issues with it, to come to the board meeting. There's no parents.
Yeah, that was today, I think.
No,
It went out
It's
this
been on,
morning.
it's been out.
Oh, it has?
Yes.
For longer than just today?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
No parents here,
okay.
which is interesting to me.
And honestly, if you're asking me what I would do with minimum day,
Yeah.
it would be we would have a late start Wednesday. Because there really is data that says that helps, especially secondary kids to start later, in the middle of the week.
And where does my daughter
And
go?
K-12, we could meet as a group.
But
But,
where does my daughter go in the morning when I'm at work and
Again.
I have a late start for
Again,
her? I mean, it's really hard
Dr.
to
Kolvik
do.
and I are on the same page with this.
Okay.
I have 0 minimum days, okay? we would pay for that outside of our time.
No, my
Because
child.
instructional time is critical.
I know, I'm asking, where would my child go in the morning when I come to work for a meeting and they come to late start?
We're not doing it anyway, so it's
I
not
know, I'm
even a
just
discussion.
asking, okay, I was asking the question because I'm sure there are parents
Right.
that I'm wondering how would that work for parents?
I
that
would
work
have
full-time?
no minimum days at all. And we would meet other times and compensate staff for meeting for those other times. But you don't want to do that either.
No, because I have a
I don't know,
kid-
I don't
yeah,
need to know why. All
Yeah.
I'm telling you is there are only two choices.
Yeah,
Either you have minimum days, or you have less minimum days,
If
or
the-
you pay for
yeah.
time outside the contract.
If the majority of the parents want full-time and no minimum days, then maybe that's the way it should go on a survey. But if parents
again-
are wanting Tuesdays, then how can we make it work so that we can have every Tuesday? And Halloween, we take out Halloween for a training, which is great because teachers need training. But we're doing all of our festivities the day before then. So then that's a non-teaching day most of the time because we're doing parades and we're doing parties and we're doing Halloween. So then that's one less instructional day. So I don't know, I
Again,
do know
I'm-
that it's.
my job's not to take care of people's Halloween for them.
No, what I'm
It's to have
saying is
kids learn.
teaching time. I'm saying instructional teaching time, and I'm trying to, I'm just trying to explain what it looks like in the classroom. And that if we take out a day, then just because the holiday, we want kids to have fun, so the holiday's just being bumped. That's it, that's all I'm saying. But I don't know. I would like to see the survey of what parents, or maybe there's another way it can work. Can we add another day to the calendar for student learning instead of taking out Tuesdays? Do a training a
Just
different day.
negotiate it.
Well, I mean, a
So-
different training day. We agreed to having an extra day, but we didn't know that we were taking out a day of instruction. I didn't realize that. A
I
day of
was-
instruction to
Still
take
have
away
180 days.
Tuesdays.
We still have 180 school days. We don't have less school days.
This calendar.
The state requires
Okay.
180 days.
So what happened with the October 30th? It's no longer a school day. It
It's
got
at the end
added.
of the day.
Okay,
The end of
then
the
what are
school
the
year, June-
Tuesdays for you're adding
Friday,
because of
June
just
5th.
instructional time? Not because we lost the third, I was under the impression of what you just said was that the holiday of Halloween was taken off,
Oh,
so
that's
that
separate.
part has to go. It is separate. Okay, because just about 30 minutes ago, you had said to the board it was, sorry, I was confused, very confused, that the holiday of Halloween was taken out and then the instructional days.
Halloween
I
has
added
always
those
been,
together.
Halloween's always been,
Okay,
the day of Halloween is now a professional
yeah, I was
development day.
putting those together as
But we
to
also
why
added
the
a Friday at the
instructional
end of the year to keep the 180 days.
time. Okay,
Yes.
So
okay,
there, we have to have 180 days. We can't have
Okay.
179.
okay,
We're not allowed to.
Yeah.
So we have 180 days, and we have fewer Tuesdays, 25 hours less Tuesday. But other than that, nothing's really changed.
well, maybe we should add 181 days and give the Tuesdays back to the parents, or, I don't know, the survey, I don't know. But, and maybe you're right, since nobody spoke up, then that's the way it is.
I
and-
just thought, I expected there to be a flood of parents here, but
It,
there aren't
and maybe
any.
it'll be an after the fact, I don't know, but they were not aware, as far as I know, they were not aware before, today. So, and maybe I mistake seeing a Facebook post, but now that I'm on vacation, I'm on Facebook quite a bit, but, I don't know. I just think
And all I'm saying, Amy,
parents
is
should have
it
some,
has to come from somewhere. And if you're asking me, I would have no release Tuesdays, we'd have full days. And we would work on our collaboration outside the contractual day and pay to make that happen.
Yeah.
We got a one-year contract. That's a great negotiations topic. But more instructional time will pay dividends.
and instructional time is very important, and I think there are things that take away from instructional time that is not about the hour, it's about the stuff that's happening in the classroom, the behaviors, and it's about interruptions. And I think that should be looked at before taking away Tuesdays.
Okay.
Behaviors take up a great deal of instruction time.
And-
As Jeannie knows,
And you're talking about K-5, because I will tell you, if you're at the high school, disruptions aren't taking up time in the high school classrooms nor the middle schools. It's different at K-5 than it is middle school, high school. But we're a unified district, and we have to make a calendar and everything that works for both of them. Things are very different. The high school kids, when Lisa talks about kids who aren't awake at 8 o'clock, that's the high school, it's not K-5.
they show up late at
They're not
K-5.
arriving.
Well, I know they show up late, that's not the kid's fault.
No, I know it's not the kid's fault.
It's not the kid.
They're tired and it's early for them,
But-
yeah.
I have to believe that if I give my teachers more time, we'll have better results. If I don't believe that, then I'm making a statement. And my statement is, I think we need more time on task. And there are ways to do that, and there are ways to partially do it, and there are ways to completely do it. And we're on a one-year contract. And so if this doesn't work, fine, show me what plan B is, but I'm going to totally disagree with Lisa about time on task and contact with their teacher being a good thing. Okay? More time on task is going to help.
Yeah, the last comment I'll say is I just wish it was more consistent to where it's not every other and parents are trying to figure out what week it is and what date it is. Life is hard alone without a school
And
schedule, but
let me just tell you this,
Yeah.
and the reason I did a K-12, because every single building follows this calendar, which we don't now. We haven't for the 3 years I've been here. This school has a minimum day, but they don't. The high school has an exam schedule. The high school moves their minimum day because of exams. There's a whole week in October where elementary's on minimum days, but the other buildings aren't. I get calls all the time about that. My babysitter's my high school kid. They're in school. How come they're in school but my second grader isn't? So that's why we tried to do a K-12 so it's the same for everybody. High school kids should have parent-teacher conferences just like second graders do. And so that's what we tried to do, was provide a calendar that was as consistent as we could be with the second and fourth Friday, or the second and fourth Tuesday. The Thursday, Friday come at end of trimesters because of high school exam schedules. And again, there's no perfect solution. No matter what the calendar is, somebody's not going to like something in it.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And again, I would like to make every day the same because that's really easy for me. But again, that's a issue of staff being compensated for time other than the current contractual limit. So I'm open to those discussions.
So early on in the discussion, it was mentioned that there was, some schools already have this every other Tuesday.
Oh,
or
there are
every-
lots of schools where
So
that's
lots
not
of-
unique.
Huh? So lots of school districts use
Yeah,
it
there are
every
a lot of
other
schools
week.
that have every other week, but they do every other week, and that's a consistent thing that they do.
Okay,
Yeah, it's just, it comes down to you gotta sort out what you wanna do.
right.
I have questions when you're finished.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump right up.
No, jump right up,
I
that's
just
fine.
wanted to get out of my chair.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So hi, my name's Laura Boland, I'm a teacher at Brookside School. And I sent an email in response to the calendar that came out. You know, I'm not in favor of it for many reasons. What I do like is more instructional time. I think that's great. Currently, we're over the minimum. We don't have instructional minutes anymore that we have to meet, but there's a suggestion of instructional minutes. And for kindergarten, it's about 200 minutes a day. And for 1 to 3, it's 280 a day. So at Brookside, we're already over those instructional minutes. So that leads me to think that a lot of the organization and thought that went into the calendar was determined maybe by high school needs. I'm only putting this together, surmising this on my own because I know that the high school found out late in the year, in the spring or late winter, that they were behind in minutes and had to stop all of the minimum Tuesdays. So that leads me to wonder what's really driving this change. And I also think older kids can handle a longer day much better than the K2s. I'm at the K2 campus, so my focus is with the littles. And that's really where I'm coming from, is speaking for the littles. A longer day, and I do know the charter school goes longer, and they have littles there too. And I know that their teachers meet outside of their regular day, but they have a staff of 6 teachers. Much easier to meet with 6, and they manage it. They can manage a collaborative time with a less structured calendar, or however they've structured it. It works for them. I guess my point is that I always felt that this collaborative time worked for us. From my point of view at Brookside, it was working. And in fact, we've been ramping it up to make it work better. And I've put a lot of energy into doing that. So it's like when you're driving something and you're putting a lot of energy into it, and then suddenly you slam the brakes on it and flip it in reverse. And it's like, whoa, we've really been working to improve what we have. Now, I know that you've wanted to get rid of minimum Tuesdays. Another thing on my list of annoyances is that I sat in negotiations. I was on the negotiation team, and this was never brought up. And also, I don't see the connection. What I mean by this is eliminating the minimum day Tuesdays.
Oh, well, I don't know what session you're in, but when we talked about adding a professional development day, I talked about, it was right on one of the proposals. I know we were going to do less Tuesdays.
I must have missed that.
Because I've been pretty
Dawn
upfront
was
about
there
less
too.
Tuesdays.
You know, then I guess I missed it. It floored me, but the connection between adding one day, that correlation was never clearly laid out to my knowledge. I didn't catch it. That, oh, if we add another professional development day, then we don't need to have as many minimum days, Tuesdays for collaboration time. And the two don't weigh out. I mean, a PD day is 8 hours, or 7.5. All of those 36, I'm assuming we're in school for 36 weeks, that's 54 hours of collaborative time. So I don't see the correlation there between, oh, we added one more PD, so we can get rid of these.
Because we only took out 17 of them, 16 of them.
Okay, so we have 25 hours less, is
Yeah.
what you just said.
Yeah.
It still doesn't equate.
No, it's not a one-for-one trade. No, of course it isn't. I'd love to make it a one-for-one trade.
But
But
when I read
you'd
the
like that
email,
even
I
less.
heard, when I read the email, I heard that it was like a one-for-one.
No.
Oh, we got one more over here, so it's justified to take away this over here. My point is, I don't see that correlation. I do think, and I also really object to the implication that you made that teachers think that it's easier on them, or that Lisa may have implied that we want our minimum day Tuesdays because it's easier on us.
No,
And you
I'm
said it's
using that
easier
from
on
Amy's
teachers.
statement, that it's easier for her in her family life to not work after the contract.
Well, what I heard you say was that it's easier on teachers to have a minimum day Tuesday. And maybe the implication was because we don't have to teach as much.
No?
Okay, but I heard easier on teachers. There's nothing in this proposal that I object to because it's going to be harder on me. It's not going to be harder on me. My fear is it's going to be harder on my students. And if I get specific into my needs, I work with kids in the resource classroom who have, it's a little bit complicated, but I think the board should know. So the way that we've worked out resource, how I can support kids with mild to moderate learning disabilities, is that, and I can do my testing, and I can hold IEP meetings within a school day, so that we're not having meetings that go until 5 p.m., is that I teach those students directly 4 days a week. The minimum Tuesdays I use to test. Because when am I going to test them? When those initial, referrals that come up, or the triennials that come up. Although K2, I don't get a lot of tries, but I do get a lot of initials. And so anyway, it's worked out that my students who are resource students who are not on grade level, so grade level is difficult for them, have a difficult time sustaining their attention, whether it's for ADHD or autism or whatever their disability is. They can sustain during a shortened Tuesday because we have a lot of interruptions. There's PE, there's smart time, anyway, smart time's now gone too. So if Tuesdays are, it's going to make that a lot more of a juggling act. And really, honestly, I don't think how I can justify it to myself that I won't provide services on Tuesday. So I will have to say to my principal, I must provide services 5 days a week, which I don't have a problem with. I'm not trying to make it easier on myself.
Building
But
level
the problem is how am I going to give them their academic testing, and then we're going back to having IEP meetings after school, which is fine. We will make that work. Teachers will have to come in and everyone will have to stay, which we all do on our own time. I don't think a teacher's ever, anyway, it's not like we're trying to make our lives easier or trying to get something out of the school district at all. I'm really looking at what is the best for the kids. And also I'm trying to realize within myself that, am I just kind of opposing change? Am I being resistant to change? And I think there is some resistance to change within me. I also think that this was something that was working. It was a way of operation that was working. I felt that we were working on improving it. And I do think that collaboration is important. And there's a plethora of research. I pulled up one in the second. I was sitting over
teacher
there by the
collaboration's a great thing.
Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development that talks about, and the ongoing thing is that where do schools find the time for collaboration?
Right.
So there's this research-based, evidence-proven need for collaboration and how collaboration really impacts student learning.
Right.
But then also, the rub is how do districts and schools find that time to collaborate? So I
You're on it.
understand your need to want to think outside the box and find something another way. My feeling is that this is just, we're not going in the right direction. This isn't going in the right direction. It's not building in more collaboration time. It's taking away collaboration time. And then getting that time back later will be more of a struggle. If we do decide that this tanks, this was a bad idea, then we kind of have to regroup and rebuild next year.
Well, let me just say this. Doing the same thing we've been doing and getting the results we are getting is the definition of insanity. You can't change a light bulb in our district without somebody not liking it, okay? So I understand that people don't like change. I don't believe that our scores dictate that we should figure out what the minimum number of minutes we should meet is. I think we should know what the maximum number of minutes we should meet should be or could be. Thirdly is, this is like anything else. We need to try something different. And if we find out at the end of the year it doesn't work, or we negotiate at the end of the year and people say, well, let's build in collaboration days, let's put another day in. I'm all in favor of doing that. But what I'm not in favor of doing is just doing what we're doing and praying maybe things will get better. Because we've been doing minimum days for a long time, and our test scores aren't headed that way. So I think it's time we do something different and stop figuring out what the minimum days are and minimum times, and figure out, I'm going to trust that our teachers are going to do a better job if I give them more time. I hope that's the case. I would guess that would be the case.
Yeah, I can't argue with you on reaching for the maximum number of minutes. I agree with that. I am really concerned about us losing time to collaborate. And we are losing time to collaborate with this model. I also am worried about the students that I serve and how that's all going to work out, but of course that will get worked out. Most likely it'll all take place after school or a different way. The other thing that really bothers me And, I mean, some of my opposition to this is my own internal resistance to change. Some of it, not all of it. I think a lot of my concerns are valid, that's why I'm standing up here in front of you. But you know, it's this idea that what really gets to me and doesn't help with my resistance to change is this idea that stakeholders weren't invited into this process. And by one of the biggest stakeholders, I think, should be a representative of the teachers. We're the ones who are in the classroom with the kids every day. We kind of see things from that ground up view. And administrators are not in the classroom every day. I think you kind of see things from the up-down view. The district that I want to work in, and I've said this before, is a collaborative district, one that seeks collaboration at as much as they can, and really wants to bring in the stakeholders and the parents. I understand this was posted on Facebook and no parents are here. It's also summer and 100 degrees outside, and they're probably still swimming at a lake somewhere. But that's what bothers me, is that I'm feeling less and less like this district really seeks input from its stakeholders, especially the teachers. And that's what leaves me very disheartened. The rest I'll live with. I don't know how long I'll live with it. I probably won't be very happy. I don't know how I'll feel. Maybe I'll love it. But the fact that I wasn't brought into the process goes to the core of my desire for direct democracy. And my urge and desire, it's an ethical thing with me. I want to be involved. I want to know, Amy talked about respect. I want to feel that my voice is valued. And this goes to you, not to the board, but to you, Mr. Westerberg. Because over and over I have felt this way in this district, that we're not sought out. And that's what I would like to see.
And I will tell you, there are decisions that need to be made. And I make those in the best interest, I think, of kids in teaching and learning. And I met with John and talked about all kinds of calendar stuff. But we couldn't even agree on a calendar with minimum Tuesdays every day on when vacations were. So at some point, I have to make a decision. I know clearly the teachers would like to have every day Tuesday minimum day. You realize I understand that, right? You realize I understand that we need to improve the amount of instructional time we have. I think we need more. We need to do something different to produce better results.
Yes. What bothers me is that you implied that it's easier for teachers, and that's why we want minimum days.
It's not easier for teachers, it's just different. The only reason I use the word easy is Amy talked about her kids and getting her kids shuffled around. And yeah, I understand it would be easy to have every day be a minimum day Tuesday. It's easy for everybody to schedule. But sometimes what's easy isn't always what's best. Sometimes what's harder is,
I don't think any of us want this because it's easy. I think we should eliminate the word easy. It's really a trigger. And because none of this is coming because it's easy. The other thing is, I've probably gone on for too long. I could go on and on forever, but I'll relinquish my time. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, well, I just walked in, but I'm Sandy Lucy, I teach second grade at Brookside, and I know at Brookside, we have already mapped out our Tuesdays. I'm not sure if that was mentioned, but I worry if we have different every other Tuesday or certain Thursdays, Fridays, minimum day, I'm afraid that we're going to lose some of our professional development time and grade level time that we already mapped out in May. So
Kathleen talked about that, and she looked at her calendar and said, I'm going to rearrange some things to keep it in place. And my exact statement to her was, let's see how it works, and if you're not having it, then we're going to have to figure out something to do to make that work. Okay. I'm all for teacher collaboration.
Well, we took out our PLC time that was built in during the day, certain days, so we'd have that once a week, so we'd have more instructional time Tuesdays so that we would have it after school. And now I'm afraid that's being shuffled around. And also the word consistency, I think, is just that parents rely on that, and it's just, when I just looked at it, I just saw it on Facebook today, and I just think it's just very kind of wacky around the, days. So I just think if a calendar is going to be changed, I would like it to go through, have teacher input.
And again, my philosophy is very simple. I'd rather not have any minimum Tuesdays and do it outside the contractual day. I think we would benefit greatly by having more instructional days. And because the elementaries already have a shorter day than the middle school and high school. They're already significantly shorter. Okay, so it isn't about the high school, it isn't about Brookside, it's the entire district having a common calendar and gaining some instructional minutes for everybody.
Okay, well, my opinion for professional development being during our contractual day is, we get more, teachers are able to be there, and that benefits the students because we're able to be there during those hours, because a lot of us have a lot of other things going on, and our families we go to after hours, so it's just really, it's guaranteed when it's during the school day, then everyone's there, and it helps us really collaborate, and I just think collaboration is really key to helping student achievement. It's really, really key that, we have our time in the day, and I didn't know this was going to change, so I just wanted some teacher input, before you make big changes like that.
I think one of the things that if you really want to go outside the box, you ought to look at 4-day weeks and longer days.
That requires a separate ed code.
Right. But again, it's California, so you got to go through the ed code mountain and see if you can get to the top of it. But those are issues for us that we have to look at.
Okay, yeah, with longer days, I think of the little kids I teach, they're 7 years old.
There's a downside.
There's a certain amount of time where they really retain, and then you get past that, and it's just, they don't remember.
And locally, our local charter goes 40 minutes longer every day. Their normal bell schedule's 40 minutes longer, and they don't do any minimum days. They spend 125 more hours of classroom instruction a year at each grade level than we do.
Well, at Brookside,
and the results are pretty good.
We really value our minimum days. We use every minute. Yep. We really do, and I've been grateful to have it. So
this was not from the premise that people aren't doing what they need to on Tuesday.
Yeah.
This is about kids and instructional time.
And it helps us with instruction a lot. Yep. And I'm a grade level chair in my grade level, and we have new teachers every year, and that's when that we really get to answer their questions. There's no time at lunch, recess. It's really time when we have the grade level meetings or the collaboration time. Yep. That is just super valuable to us. So.
I don't think it's being wasted. I don't think it's pointless. I'm making this statement, basically, we need more instructional time. Not less collaboration, more instructional time.
But when I looked at the calendar, it didn't seem like there was a lot more. If it was every other Tuesday, and then I guess there was a little bit, but it didn't seem like a big difference.
Well, there's a professional development day that we didn't have before.
Yeah,
so
one day we negotiated.
And it's not a one-to-one trade. We didn't lose this many of hours for a PD day. But when I met with the admins, we tried to figure out what makes sense if we have a weeks like in November, when we already have a week off, we have a Veterans Day, we have a Memorial Day, taking another minimum in there is even less instructional time in November. So there's no perfect calendar. And I'm trying to do both things, create instructional time, and at the same time, trying to give teachers collaboration time. There has to be a give and take. And this year is more give to instructional time than collaboration. If it's not what we need and they need more, we'll have to figure out a plan to put that in place. And this isn't locked into place. If somebody came to me, if Kathleen came to me and said, Mark, it's not working, I need more time, we'd figure out how to put it into the calendar. We're in control over the calendar.
Yeah, but
Okay.
you wouldn't change it mid-year.
Good. There's nothing that says we can't.
It just seems really confusing to parents and they make plans.
Again,
for the
all I'm
year.
saying is I'm throwing those out as ideas, but we've got to start somewhere.
Okay, well, I just want to keep collaboration, and I have new teachers coming next year that really need that time, and I just don't want to take it away because I worry it will never come back. And I
That's-
just value it, so.
And I've been in your classroom, and I will tell you, an hour and a half more a week with you for your kids is a great thing. It's a great thing. I can't substitute that. I would tell you right now, I would prefer that over collaboration time. I'd rather pay for collaboration time some other time. You're a great teacher and you do a good job with kids. And I think giving you more time will produce better results. I mean, that's, I can't
Okay,
get
but then
past
so
that.
you're saying our collaboration time is on our own
No,
time,
no.
you know, outside of the
No,
school?
we have to figure out how to do that. If it means more compensation to do that, then we do that. If
Okay,
it
but-
means we do something differently, you know, I'm open to suggestions. But what I'm not open to do is just continue to do what we've always done and get what we've always got. Because it's not headed in the right direction. And it's not because people aren't trying, it's not because people don't care. We have to make some changes in our system to get kids into a better place.
And I agree, we need to make changes, but I think we need to look harder and deeper at where, you know, where we really are falling apart. And I don't think more instructional minutes, honestly, is where it's falling apart. I don't think that's the answer, but
Yes. Very good
I
point.
think we need to look deeper at what it really is.
Curriculum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cindy, that was great. I do want to say one more thing. I had a moment to figure out just how many more minutes, how much more instructional time this proposal will give us. And it's 16 more minutes a day. So to eliminate those days of collaboration will give us 16 more minutes a day,
On average over the course of the year.
on average over the course
Oh,
of the year.
yeah. And I wouldn't add 16, well, I would add 16 minutes to every day. But that wasn't the point. The point was it's an hour and a half of consecutive time. Just like I wouldn't give you guys 16 minutes of collaboration time. That's pointless. By the time you get together and get started, you'd be done. I mean,
But
the
just the
point
fact
is this
that-
is an hour and a half of uninterrupted time.
But twice a month, they'll have
Right.
3 more hours of instruction
In the afternoon.
Yep.
in the afternoon.
Any further discussion on the calendar?
Yeah, I'm not done. So on the Thursdays and Fridays of this calendar, is that when teachers are going to be doing their report cards? Is that what those are set up for? Because the high school is taking a minimum day to do exams, then they take the afternoons to grade. K-5 teachers basically will be using those days to make sure their report cards get done,
That would be my assumption what Kathleen's going to do.
and Nancy.
Yeah.
Okay, and then like my other part of the concern is that well, actually, all of the people who spoke took care of most of my concerns. But then I do have the issue with the faculty meetings and all the other kinds of, teachers, or at least in the past, didn't get 4 straight days a month of collaboration. So there were faculty meetings, and I know at Blosser they used to have little come in and somebody does a talk about whatever they went on when we used to do core instruction, Common Core, all right? And people gave little in-services that afternoon and things like that. Those things, basically we used to pull maybe 1 or 2, maybe, collaboration days. And then am I understanding correctly that the collaboration time that used to happen from, like 9 to 10, 15 or whatever is gone?
At Brookside, they eliminated it.
Yes.
One a month now.
That was eliminated because we thought that we would have
Because-
collaboration time on Tuesdays.
In the afternoon.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
we
so
agreed
then,
to
since that's all
eliminate
been cut, do those times, like faculty meetings, et cetera, are they going to be the kinds that happen after the school day then? So that those 2 minimum days are strictly collaboration or Do you have I'm just wondering how much of a plan is.
It just has to, it depends on the building and the admins and what's got to get done. Generally speaking, in the high school, middle school, they're more staff meeting oriented than K-5s are.
Okay.
And so they may have 20 minutes of a staff meeting, but the rest of the time we spent on collaboration. They just need to work out a schedule that works for them. And again, my point is, we didn't all sit down and write the Declaration of Independence so it was perfect, okay? And so, does it get changed? Does it get adjusted? Maybe, but we gotta start somewhere.
I understand starting something. I naturally have my concerns, but they've been expressed. The concern I have, especially with some shorter days, you know, the comment about how elementary schools have a shorter day than the other schools. It has always been set up so that parents could come and talk to teachers about their kids. Parents, especially at those early K-5 years, in particular K-2, seem to be more attached daily to what their teachers are doing. And so it's not really like those shorter days. I mean,
That's
they're
not
booked.
really
There's
true,
no-
by the way.
What? That they're more
That
attached.
it's shorter because of meeting with parents. The reason
Yeah,
it's
that's what we're
shorter is
supposed to be
because
told.
middle school and high school have built-in daily planning in their schedules, and elementary
Yeah.
people do not. And so it is a way to help
Balance it.
balance that scale, which I totally agree with, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't think that Laura should have to do an instructional day from 8 to 3 like a high school teacher and have 2 minor planning periods during the week when the high school teachers have a significant one every day.
Well, that's always been an
And so
issue because K-12.
that's why they have a shorter day.
minutes.
It has really nothing to do with parents coming in and
No.
talk. Because I would
Sort of.
assume my high school teachers would talk to a parent after the bell rings too. It wasn't built to be a collaboration time with parents. It was built so to justify the fact that high school or middle school have built-in planning that K-5 do not. That's why I would never recommend that they have exactly the same amount of minutes, because their minutes get used differently by their staff. And so I'm very cognizant of that, and I'm not advocating that, well, K-5 needs to teach the same have the same day that the high school has. Because their days don't ever play out the same.
No, and there's a lot of things that don't play out the same.
Exactly.
We don't need to go through
We're
that.
trying to get a K-12, we're a unified district, and we have to bring those together.
Yeah, even though the needs are so different. And that's what
I mean,
concerns me.
I would do that, Paula. I would gladly make the middle school and high school and elementary all have the same day, if you let me hire 4 teachers. Because I would hire a Spanish teacher and an art teacher to do K-5. So they would have planning time. That would be not identical, but equal in nature.
Well, it would be nice. They
Yeah,
currently
but
are supposed
again-
to be using
Again, that's a,
PE time, right? Is that what your prep time is
Yes,
now?
E.
Yeah.
PE time?
but again, that's a $250,000 bill that we can't swallow right now. Because I believe that if we do that, they need to be given the same planning time as the middle school, high school.
Yeah, I've always thought that.
And so the only way to do that is to add specials like art and Spanish is what I would put in. I would love to have an art and Spanish program K-5, but it's going to take me 4 staff members to do it. And I got Nikki probably up close to passing out on me right now if I even say that. But that's the truth of the matter is to make them more equal. You have to make them equal in planning as well. And
Yeah,
part of
which is-
that planning could be grade level, like it is at Bechtel, grade level planning, because they all go to exploratories at the same time. That's the ideal elementary, is to have 2nd grade exploratories all at this 50-minute period in a day. That'd be awesome. But it's going to take staff to do that. I mean, right now, we're running on 1 PE teacher with a bunch of paras. We don't even have PE teachers at both buildings. Luke's doing all this supervision and running around. So I'm gonna guess the art and Spanish teacher probably a no at this point.
Any further discussion on the calendar?
When do you check back in to see how well it's working? At the end of the first trimester, or at the end of Christmas, or?
Yeah, my world works like every other day. I'll probably hear the plus and minus.
Oh, okay. Oh, and then I did want you to know that unless the contract had changed, the minimum day in December is not a minimum day for anything but leaving 10 minutes after the students are
Right, I know.
whatever it's.
I'm not sure why we called it a minimum day. It's like
It was
it's a
a,
get out of Dodge.
it was a kind of like a token sign of respect years ago to allow people to know that they were appreciated and it was near a holiday and take off 20 minutes.
To make it not confusing, I think we just called it minimum.
Probably.
Yeah.
It should end a little, well, I think it does end.
It ends the
one-
same.
Does it end the same still?
The minimum day
Oh,
schedule.
okay. So all the schools are starting at 8:15, or are they still 3 different times?
There's 2 times.
So
There's
they start
8
at
o'clock and
8:30?
8:10.
Oh, 8 and 8:10?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I wasn't aware that the elementary started so soon.
Because there's 2 buses for elementary
Yeah, I
and
know
there's 2
the bus.
buses for high school.
Okay.
And again,
We start at 8.
Oh,
and
okay.
again, if you want to have a conversation about starting later at Blosser, it doesn't matter to me. I'm here till 5 or 6 o'clock. I
I
don't
know the
care.
feeling.
It doesn't matter. If
But
you want to
you've
start at
got kids-
8:30, but you're going to go till 3:30.
Yeah, and you've got kids being dropped off before 7:30, and there's nobody
There's no one
on
to
duty
watch
until
it.
7:30.
Exactly.
Right.
We used to, I remember those issues, you know,
Yeah.
and I agree that you can't deal with the child who isn't there.
Right.
But the kid, until they get to be big enough to walk to school on their own, the K-5s depend on their folks to get them somewhere.
And if you ask every single kid and teacher in the high school, they'd rather start at 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock.
Well, that didn't pass California, so.
But again, that's the research and logic behind it. But the reality is, the tail's wagging the dog because all the extracurriculars don't want to be later even.
Well, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments, board?
Yes, I still think that if there is confusion on having 2 days a month at minimum day, that the discussion for maybe next year should be, can we eliminate those Tuesdays as minimum days and then reimburse the teachers for spending time doing grade level meetings and collaboration?
Either before or after?
Either before, or whenever it's convenient for the teachers to do that, so that we can continue with our goal of more instructional time for our students. So,
And see, the only issue I have with that, because I think that's a great idea to reimburse people for those extra hours. The trouble is, once it's a do you or don't you show up for pay, it also becomes a do you or don't you want to come. And sometimes things are really, really important for people to know, and you're not mandated to attend. And then it's twice as much time for the rest of the staff, including well, it should only be the administrator, but it's usually other teachers who need to fill somebody in. And that's the reason why I know when we started minimum days, that was a real big drawing card because everyone needed to be in attendance. And that was better for everybody.
Yeah, well, let me just say, Tuesday afternoon attendance is the worst of any day of the week.
That's odd, unless it's strictly
There's
medical
an odd
appointments or
number of
something.
appointments that seem to be falling then, and
That's the only
unique
time you don't need a
circumstances.
sub. Truthfully, I would think
But
that thing.
that being said, it doesn't matter when it would be,
Yeah,
okay?
I don't know.
I've even heard from schools who've tried to do it Friday afternoon,
Well, that's silly.
and
You know, I'm just saying. So before we close this, can you kind of tell us a couple of school districts that are doing this, that are real successful with half the minimum time from when they had full-time? Just so I can kind of drop by and see what they like to do.
I
Oh,
know
you
that
don't
St.
know.
Helena was doing half days. Robert, there's some in Lake County.
There's Lake County, probably all of Connacht, in fact, I know for certain all of Connacht are. Lakeport, I'm not so certain. But the truth of the matter, you're going to find pluses and minuses all the time. One of the things that I really appreciate is your passion for the collaboration, and I agree. I know the research also. In fact, I led that charge years ago, and all through when I was a area superintendent, I led that charge, and we had a lot of collaboration, and with the administrators also. And so I appreciate that passion, and if it's done right, it's very effective. As far as extension of time, there's so many other variables, just like class size, and if there's a big difference in time or big difference in class size, then yeah, it's obvious. But if there's not, then it just becomes another variable mixed with other variables. So if you have a very effective instructor and you add an hour and a half to a couple of days in the month, it's going to be helpful. It's going to move, maybe not as much, but it will move the bar some. Of course, if they're with an ineffective instructional person, then that's one of those variables that will skew that, and it'll be different. But I'm sure there's going to be some discussion about this calendar when negotiations are coming around next year. I'm sure this will tag along, and so hopefully that'll maybe address some of these questions. And I appreciate, Mark, that you're saying you're willing to adjust if it looks like things are going sideways. Your administrators, when you had the conversation with your administrators, did they feel like they could make those adjustments on their sites?
Yep.
And
They did this calendar, okay? I mean, they're the ones who put the calendar together. And again, my role is very simple, my directions are really simple. Mark, try to get us into a better place. If we continue to do what we've always done, we're not going to get to that place. So if we don't like it and we have a better plan, great, let's do it. But to not do anything, it's just like the facilities. I hear all the time, well, I don't think people would vote for a bond. You know what? If they vote no 99-1, I'm still going to ask for it, because my job is to give us the best we can have, not to say, oh, sorry, oh, somebody might not like it, we're not going to even talk about it. I feel the same way with instruction.
the only other comment I have is maybe we want, if it's possible, I know we have to get a schedule, because there's a lot of things that are waiting until this is anointed. But if there was some way we could get this schedule out earlier to everybody, and so that way they have they have like months to consider it and so forth. And I've seen that happen in other districts where they get it out months, and everybody, classified, certificated, everybody, and parents, it all goes out in some form or another so that they have it, so they have a few months to chew on it. I know ultimately most of what happens on this calendar is really up to you. I mean, in regards to, unions can make suggestions on all of it, and then some of it's negotiated, but I know that ultimately it's up to you, but it's always nice to have as much input from the troops before we finalize it. And unfortunately, you're in that position where you do have to have the final say in the end, but the more input we get and we hear them, the better it is for you in the long run. And if we can make any changes, then most definitely we should consider it, or you should consider it. Yeah. I'm sorry, I meant to make that much shorter.
Just a quick question. I couldn't find the updated or the revised calendar on the website.
It's not yet, because
So
it's not approved.
Okay, so it can't be posted until it's approved. So then how do parents get notified about what's coming on the agenda? And I like that point, that is, because it's better received when people are given notice instead of after the fact. And so that's, I mean, I couldn't find it anywhere, and I thought it was already done, and I was blindsided. And I think parents are going to feel the same way, but we've already hashed that out. But I just wanted to ask that question: was it available for parents to look at before, besides today as a Facebook post?
I don't know when it went out on Facebook.
We didn't put it out on Facebook.
I looked at it, I looked it up, and it was this morning. It went on Facebook. on the Willits community fan.
I don't know when it went on the Willits one, but I saw it.
No, on the
at
fan
least-
page, it's a community page, but
I
I was
saw it
wondering, is there
before.
any way parents had access to it before, when it was on
Well,
the agenda?
parents are going to get access to it very quickly because I see the press is here.
Well,
It's
but
going
what
to
I'm
be-
asking is before it was approved, because today it's approved, the advised agenda, and I understand it's up to, you know, the board and Mr. Westerberg too, but it's great to have public comment, and I think it's not enough time for people to give opinions, and then it's going to be after the fact of, well, why didn't we get told, kind of thing, and I think that happens often.
Well, I
as a
think any
district.
process, we can always get better at what we do. And so maybe we could ship it out earlier next year. And usually you ship it out and it has a big shaded draft on it across it, so nobody is confused that it's only a draft.
Well,
And it's like most things, you'll get anybody who doesn't like it, you hear
Oh,
from
yeah.
anybody who likes it,
But we
you won't hear
received
anything.
And-
So how
and-
do you gauge that?
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
sometimes, because I mean, I was in your shoes.
Yeah.
On that side, the administrative district side for a lot. And the thing is that I know you and I know I was trying to do what was best for staff and students and community. And so some of it, I mean, because the community doesn't necessarily know all the nuts and bolts and all the goings on behind the scenes, because there's a lot. However, what happens is sometimes an idea comes in, you're like, oh my gosh, we didn't think about that. And it causes you to tweak what you have. You know, you just consider it, and sometimes it's like, yeah, you know what, we can do that, that makes sense, and then you tweak that, or you do this, or you do that. Rarely, although every once in a while we did, rarely did we have to just wipe everything off the drawing board and start all over, but you know, we would make tweaks now and then because good ideas come in, and you're like, you know, we really didn't think about that, and so that's all I'm saying. But ultimately, you have to make that decision.
And I gave
It's
this
a
to
tough
Kids Club a while ago, a week ago, and talked to Chris Warren about it. And by the way, Kids Club perspective is, don't do minimum Tuesday, it's hard for us.
Oh, of course.
But they can adjust to what this is.
Hopefully I can close this out with just a couple of quick comments with respect to this. Mark's exactly correct in terms of, we gave him marching orders to make changes to get us in a better place, especially with test scores and improving the overall experience for our kids. I agree wholeheartedly that continuing to do just what we've been doing and expecting the same results is simply not something we can do. And this board is, I believe, is headed in the right direction in terms of trying to find the best answers we can for everybody concerned. But again, the focus still has to be on the kids. With respect to the Tuesdays things, I agree. The perfect scenario is every Tuesday being the minimum Tuesday or no minimum Tuesdays at all. I don't like the idea that we're going to do every other one only because it can be confusing to parents. But still, parents will adjust, they will adapt, and we will too. And if this doesn't turn out to be the best thing for us after we've tried it, I'll be the first one to stand up and say, all right, let's go back with what we had back in place until we can find something better. But I'm also willing to try new things. In fact, I think we have to try new things. And I'm sorry that it's not going to be ideal for everybody concerned, but I think we'll have to adapt and do the best we can and see if it makes a difference for us. That's really where I am.
I didn't have a chance to speak yet. When I taught, I want to remind the teachers that are here that there's 4 out of the 5 people on this board worked in schools. And so I want to remind you of that. And I worked when there was no minimum days, and I worked when when minimum days were instituted. And I also basically raised a son as an only parent because my husband worked in Ukiah, and I have no grandparents, no family support here at all. I had to make it all work. And I was also a special ed teacher, so I had to fit in IEPs and fit in testing and fit in all of those kinds of things, communicating to other staff members, teachers about students. And when I decided to run for the school board, I didn't realize our test scores were so low. I had no idea. And it was only after I got on the school board and I started being asked questions by parents and that kind of thing. And I started to look at our test scores and I realized our test scores are really bad. We have to do something different. And we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. And I know that change is very hard. In my life, I'm very resistant to change. But at least I'm old enough now that I can say I'm just being resistant to change. And we wouldn't be the only school district that is doing every other week. There's other school districts that seem to be doing fine with every other week. So I'm willing to at least try this and see if it makes a difference. And I also want to say that this was done with the input of the administrators, and I have a lot of respect for the administrators in this district. I think we have really good administrators at every school site. And they gave, this is basically a product of that collaboration of the administrators in this district. So with and I know that they care a lot about their staff as well as their students. So anyway, I know that change is hard, but it's not necessarily bad. And that we do have to try to do something different because our test scores are real low.
Anything further, Ms. Moore?
Well, I don't know, I thought Richard's hand was up. Did you have something else you had to say? You wanted to
I was
say?
looking at my watch.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'd like to call for
Gotta
the
love
vote.
that honesty.
But I do want to say that for transparency and for availability of information, next year our school app and new website will be up.
Yeah.
And we could push that information out to everyone that has that app.
Yep.
So,
So I'd like to call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Nays?
Aye.
Okay. Calendars have been approved. And I'd like to take a 5-minute break.
Bob Brick.
About there.
I try to speak.
Like I said, I can't change a light bulb without.
No, I think the basic concern is, there's not a lot of input that goes on anymore. It used to be, there was a whole lot all winning. And to say that you don't want to do the same thing over and over, if you change 4 or 5 variables, that's more than just one at a time. And it's hard to see
Well,
if
this
the
is one-
change.
You didn't have a lot of time to do, I mean, negotiations went on too long this year. That was one of the big
Oh,
problems
that's
this year.
right, you couldn't do it till it closed.
So
Like,
hopefully next year we can work together on it.
And again, Paul, your version of input is the WTA drives the train and the others ride.
Not exactly.
No, exactly.
No,
And
no, easy,
sorry.
because that's not true.
Sorry.
What my idea.
I'm the
of input-
engineer, not the caboose.
Well, you should sort of be a co-engineer, I would figure, but
No.
that's,
That's what I was
see,
doing
that's
out
just
there.
a difference.
Yeah, just,
It doesn't have a whole lot to do
Exactly what I was
with
doing out there.
WTA,
the
because
older they get,
my
I-
philosophy
the
of
older I get, the
WTA
more
didn't
stiff
match
I
up
get
real
if
well
I
the last
just
few years
sit.
either.
It's
It's a matter of,
my
it's just a basic philosophy on how things need to work.
I got out,
And I-
got out of the chair. and I'm like,
I just
I look like
truly
last night.
believe that
You got this- no one's
never
gonna
is
be
everyone
okay.
going to be satisfied with
Just those
everything.
first 4 steps.
That's the norm. But, the whole idea for me in democracy is that you get a 51 over a 49. But if you don't ask, you don't even get the 51.
Okay, but
I agree the decision needs to be
democracy
made.
and employer and employment are different things.
Sort of,
I vote in democracies for
Uh-huh.
everything.
exactly.
Okay, not in employment employers. We don't vote on everything.
And see, that's like a difference in philosophy. We're not a standard employer-employee relationship. We're a school district, which means that most everyone you deal with is gonna have, not the last couple of years maybe, because there's an awful lot of new, young, not new and young don't have to go together, but brand new to the profession types, okay? And often they're young. But more or less, you have similar years of experience, similar levels of education, and it's merely a choice of which position you chose to take on. Not so much a matter of, I am the employer, and you are the employee, and there's a reason for that. You can't do what I do. You could, you just choose not to. So it's kind of a sign of respect to say, okay, so what are you thinking? I'm gonna make the decision, I'm the boss, okay? I understand that sentence. It's just before you make that decision, if you hear everything and then you say, okay, well, I've heard all of this and I've heard all of that and I still am gonna make this decision. That's perfect, that's why you're in your chair and someone else isn't, you know? But it just,
Well, let me
just
tell you
a
how it
philosophical-
really plays out.
Oh, okay, tell me.
Even after I had that conversation,
Uh-huh.
I would have had exactly the same number of people here come and say what they said,
Uh-huh.
because they would like to have the board overrule it.
Okay.
And so the reality is somebody has to lead the ship, somebody has to be held accountable and responsible.
Right,
That's me.
yeah.
And if I make somebody unhappy, hopefully I'll make somebody else happy.
Well, yeah.
And
That's usually what the democracy does.
right, and I can tell you the vast majority of parents who talk to me, and I've talked to them, they're like, can we not do minimum Tuesday?
Uh-huh.
Why are we taking off an hour and a half of time that we could be doing educational stuff?
Right. And the hope is that you could explain to them with as much belief behind you why you do to why you don't. You know, I mean, truth, or so would be my hope, that, you know, you could begin the reasons pro and con similarly.
Unless your kid is in an athletic event in middle school, high school, that hour and a half is super unproductive for those younger ones, those middle school, high school kids. That extra hour and a half they have a week.
Of going home or whatever?
Usually it's whatever.
Okay.
And that's pretty problematic for a lot of parents.
Yeah.
But again, unfortunately, we're in a unified school district where everybody has to follow the same page.
Well, yeah, oh, I didn't say.
If we were a high school district, we'd talk about the calendar very differently. If we were an elementary district, we'd talk about the calendar very differently. Just like I talk about the length of the day. The elementary teachers have to have a shorter day unless we're going to increase their prep time.
Well, yeah, since they
So-
prep for 6 or 7 subjects a day instead
Yeah.
of 1 or 2.
Well, and they're just different nuances. You can never make kindergarten and calculus the same thing, but that's what a contract expects you to do. It expects you to bring parity to calculus and kindergarten. And you can't do it.
Meeting back to order. We are down to, I believe, item D, David, approval of provisional internship permit, a PIP for Shelby Dodd, multiple subject teacher, elementary certificated staff.
This is one of those PIPs that we didn't get to.
Is it,
It's a new.
Yeah, it's a new.
it's new?
Yeah.
Yeah, so but it doesn't say which school she's going to work at?
Brookside, I believe.
Oh, is it Brookside?
Brookside.
Elementary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just said, you know, an elementary certified.
Jeez.
What grade?
Well, that's, yeah.
I'm trying to, second grade.
Well, so she's not the special, oh, that's the one you rewrote, right? I'm
Yeah.
starting to
That's the-
Yeah,
confuse
this
my
is a
teachers.
second grade teacher.
So
Just a
three-year
regular-
special ed, one is
Right.
elementary, okay.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve.
I move that we approve.
A second,
I second.
and discussion. Is there any reason not to go down this road?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No.
Any discussion on the board?
Just, this teacher has an elementary certification, credential, right? Or is that, I mean, it says here that it means that there is a competence requirement that's not met. Well,
Right.
multiple subject wouldn't be a particular subject, so it means the whole credential.
I'm trying to think what her scenario is.
Oh, okay.
Is she the single subject who has to get the multi-subject?
Yes, I think so.
So she's
Yeah.
like what was, a single subject of
She
what
was-
it,
Yeah.
Yeah, that needs to become a multi-subject.
The one that they just did the interview for
Right.
the other day.
Yeah.
okay.
And
Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now we're down to LCAP.
oh, our lovely 80 pages of LCAP that's going to change the planet. You know, our local control that's not local, because you need to make it look like everybody else's, and they define how you can spend the money. I have completed the document.
Ready?
Part of the LCAP that I have to do yet is the now new federal addendum, 17 essay questions, by the way. I really would like to go meet Tony Thurman and tell him, yeah, I'd like to see your LCAP for the Department of Ed and your federal addendum for your LCAP budget for your Department of Ed. Because if ours is 80, his should be 800 pages.
He'll
Again,
probably produce something, but he probably has a dozen staff working on it, not you, not just him.
I hate to belabor this, but the state of California believes local control doesn't work. I hate to break that to people, but they think it doesn't work. That's why we get micromanaged by the county and the state. They can't just give us X amount of funding per kid and say, well, Willits might be different than Beverly Hills, but do a good job and you better get good test scores. They can't seem to do that. So I have done our LCAP, and the changes in our LCAP are fairly insignificant. We've moved some things around. The notable things in there is an SRO, is Student Resource Officer, is completely funded. You'll notice that I also put in there a $20,000 amount. I took it out of facilities, by the way. I didn't add, because there's no adding. And I put it in for clubs and activities, because one of the things we negotiated was a $500 stipend. So if Dawn wants to do a club, she meets 10 times with 10 kids, and the principal approves it, we pay him a $500 stipend to do that. And so I budgeted some of that money in to be able to do that. Because again, I know I belabor the hours that the charter has also. One of the things they do is provide clubs and activities after school. We need to replicate that. And if you want to talk about educational research that's a definite, kids who are involved in extracurricular activities do better in school. That needs to be K-12. Because sports doesn't take care of the high school kids. They have other interests besides just athletics. Same thing, K-8. You know, we need to give teachers some pay for taking care of kids' needs in other ways than just classroom. And we added that to the contract, okay? That was me putting that into the contract. They didn't ask for it. I put it in because I know its value and I know they'll see value in doing it. One of the other things that's in there that's a slight change is we don't need an additional teacher at Bechtel. However, we need an additional teacher at kindergarten. And so it was literally just swap the names, take out Bechtel, and keep class size reduction where we need it at the elementary. So the changes aren't dramatic, and it's meant to help us take care of our needs. We would be taking care of our needs regardless of doing the LCAP, but it is the form we go through and the process we go through. It's getting red penned as we speak down at the county office, and I'll make my corrections. And
So I have a question about the $500. I know it was negotiated as part of the contract.
We went over the.
But what if, say there was a retired engineer or something like that that wanted to do a STEM class, STEM thing after school or something. So is the $500 available to people like that from the community, or is it just credentialed teachers?
at this point, we're talking only about teachers. And I'll tell you the reason why. Is I want the teachers to not feel inhibited. What we're gonna do is budget the money out between each building. I don't want Mike or Nancy to be able to say, oh, sorry, Dawn, I've already spent my club money. I want the teachers to take a run at it for a year and figure out what they can do and not do. And we'll get a sense for how much is there. Now, some years there might be a little more or a little less, but I think you'll get a good feel of where we're at.
What about materials if there was a club that a teacher wanted to start or an after-school activity?
Principals are gonna have to use their discretion in their discretionary budgets for that. Or,
Might be something we could do through the Ed Foundation too.
yeah, I mean, the Ed Foundation
That's
gives some money for that. I think the Ed Foundation would be, if Dawn wanted to do a astronomy class and they wanted some telescopes, I think the Ed Foundation would think that was a pretty cool thing.
Right.
Yeah. I'm just trying to open the door. I don't know where the door is gonna lead to, but I do know having our adults, teachers, with kids more times before or after school is a good thing. The clubs aren't gonna meet during the school day. This is for non-contractual time. But I wanna start with the teachers. I don't really wanna, because we had a big discussion about this at our admin meeting about, well, what about, I know somebody who'd like to come in and do this. Well, I want our teachers to be the first ones. And again, if we get into a situation where we budgeted an amount and they're not using it at the building and they do have somebody like that, I would approve, if I were the principal, because I want the principals to approve this. I'm not micromanaging it for them. But if Mike had a lot of money left over and he had somebody in the spring who wanted to do something, I'm not opposed to that. But I want the teachers to have first shot. This is like coaching for me. Coaching, the only place in our district where we define how much you get paid to coach is in the teacher's contract. But we have a lot of people who coach who aren't teachers. But we always refer back to the teacher's contract. That's where it comes from.
And the teachers get first shot at it.
Right, and they get first crack at it.
Okay.
Are you gonna create some sort of form that the principals keep track of it and all that?
Yeah.
That was one of my questions about it.
Yeah, we're gonna do you write out a little paragraph of what you wanna do, you take it to the principal, she signs it, and then you literally you have 10 meetings where you're 10 meetings and 10 kids each time, and it's good.
Like where we have to take attendance or something. I know like for Kids Club, if you're doing the after-school intervention, we had to take attendance.
Yeah, because
Just so you know.
what I don't.
Keep us accountable.
I wrote a grant many years ago and set up basically the same thing for clubs and paid teachers to initiate clubs and so on. Very, very successful. A lot of students that would normally have not gotten involved had a bond with a teacher, and then they had a whole nother set of activities and a group that they really identified with. I thought it was very, very positive. So for $500, that's
It's a deal.
a great investment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure Linda will make me dot all the i's and t's and payroll and how it's counted and all that.
Okay. So for the adoption of the LCAP, I believe that's what we're working on. Did we get a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion to approve.
And a second?
Oh, go ahead.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Then can I ask questions?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there was a chunk in here which I must not have marked, but it didn't have any answers at all. It was just blank. Is that?
Were there blank pages in there?
Yes.
Yeah,
I pulled
they
the
just,
blank pages out. It's the one after, that's, I think, the.
oh, okay, well,
The digital version has some blank
Yes.
pages in it.
oh, okay. And then the other part,
Digital, yes.
oh, okay, the other part was on translations and things like that, and it said the cost was neutral and that you depended upon the people who are already employed to
Yeah, it's
take
something
care of
that's,
that? Does
it's
that work?
budgeted elsewhere, so
Oh,
it's not
okay.
related to the supplemental concentration grant.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Because that, you really can't depend on volunteers and
No,
you
we
can't
need
always
people
even
on
depend on.
supplemental timesheets.
Oh, okay, Okay, I didn't, all right.
But I left it in there, Paula, because somebody who looks at our LCAP, who looks at our district would say you have
Right.
translation services.
Oh,
They
okay.
don't care what you pay for it or how you pay for it.
Oh, okay.
But
Well, you have a
people
huge enough
reference
population.
LCAP as kind of a, what does Willits Unified School do as a district? What kind of services do they
Okay, I
provide?
thought that's what you had explained
Yeah.
last time or whenever.
There's several things in here who are cost neutral, like the trimester
Well,
high school.
Yeah, I read that
It
one
doesn't,
too. and
there's
I
no
thought, well,
cost
okay.
to it. It's how we do business at the high school.
Okay, and that made sense, because you just scheduled them, okay,
Right.
but
Just
when
like
it
the
came
middle
to
school.
people,
Right.
It's
Okay.
essentially cost neutral to the supplemental concentration grant.
Oh,
portion of
okay,
the budget.
oh, okay, I just didn't understand. Good.
Any further? Call for the vote for adoption of the LCAP plan for 2019-20.
Aye.
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 Unanimous? Now we're down to Nikki and her budget.
Okay, so we had gone over some of the main changes at the last meeting, especially regarding revenues and things like that. I have made a few just revisions as I was refining it since that meeting and some corrections. One first thing that I would like to look at is if you go to page 9, is the multi-year projection. So that was the portion we really hadn't gone into at the last meeting. So I just wanted everyone to have an opportunity to look at this before we do the approval. If you go down to line C.
Line what?
C,
Charlie?
net increase or decrease in fund balance. And it's about 2/3 of the way down. So 65,000, deficit 51,000, and then deficit 320. So these are each of the years. So really want to reiterate to everyone, this does not include anything from any of our new bargaining agreements or tentative agreements. The next time we get together, we'll be looking at public disclosures related to each of those agreements and their impacts upon the budget. And so, I mean, just as an example,
That'll be in August.
well, did we make a decision? We had to discuss whether we would
We
try to
want to
schedule
try and
a
do
special
an
meeting.
August or a June 27th type
Oh,
meeting.
yeah, gotcha.
We need to put that in place so the teachers, July 1, have district
I-
fund healthcare, right?
I don't know if we can do the 27th.
That's a week from today.
We have to do
This
a notice of.
Public disclosure has to be more days than that. It's 10 days.
Okay.
Whatever, but, yeah,
We
we'll-
should
Is it
do
the end
one.
of July?
Our hope ultimately is that we could get it going before that August meeting so that we can get all of the payroll set up and not have to do anything as a retro. That
Gotcha.
would be our ultimate desire
Okay.
in terms of payroll. Because that does really increase the amount of work.
And it can be a single item
Mhm.
board meeting.
Right.
Can we try and do that sooner than later?
That would,
Like, are we talking July now?
Well, let's try and figure out, I'll get email out to you and find out how quickly, what's the practical date we can do that. We gotta do a public disclosure and then how soon can we take action?
Okay.
so ultimately, when I look at this, I think, oh, good, positive for 1920, but of course, this does not factor in any of our bargaining agreements. Just as like a rough ballpark, for instance, health insurance settlements, we're looking at, I'm thinking maybe $260,000 per year, and then of course, anything related to salaries. So we will quite certainly be deficit spending, probably by several $100,000 once we have that in place. We have made some other adjustments coming into this year so that we would be at the starting point to allow for that
Right.
at all, because previously when you looked at a projection for 1920, we were already projected to be deficit by quite a bit. So we've tried to make some adjustments to enable us to do those settlements. And the other piece that we might want to look at that we've talked about had been the cash flow. So that's actually on page 7. And it's a landscape-oriented page here, the cash flow worksheet. So this is obviously, and there's no way to predict like all of the flow of your expenditures, but this is our best projection of how our cash will move throughout the year. And you can see the cash balances at the very bottom for each month. And one of the ones I really go to, of course, is the lowest one, which is November. And you can see that
December.
it's in the November has 963.
You said lowest.
Yeah. At the bottom.
He's looking at a different number.
Sorry,
Okay.
the beginning, that's the beginning cash.
Oh, yeah, okay.
The bottom is the cash balance
Yeah, okay.
projected for the end of each month. And so like November is a really good example to me that when we talk about fund balance and how high a fund balance is, that's your projected ending fund balance once everything is squared up on June 30th, but your cash is flowing throughout the year and going up and down. And so we can see that we get down to a cash balance of $963,000 at one point during the year, even with the type of fund balance that we currently have. So if we continue, adding things in terms of expenditures, and we have, multiple years on top of each other, deficit spending and spending fund balance down, we ultimately will reach a point where we're going to have to be extremely conscientious about our cash flows and monitoring those on a regular basis. And it's not all the time, a lot of it depends. You can see the real differences. If you look at near the top, it says revenue limit. So that's this is an old form that we still use and really need to retitle that. That's LCFF. Revenue limit was like the old main funding. LCFF is what it's called now, but that is our primary source of revenue. And you can see the way it flows into us throughout the year. It's very different month to month. And so, we do have months where our cash is more robust, but we certainly have months where if we had a smaller fund balance, we would need to be very, very careful.
In years past, I know that there have been occasions when we've had to borrow from the county in order to make payroll for
Yeah.
short-term,
Yeah.
basically a short-term loan until, and clearly we want to avoid that whenever possible.
Absolutely, and I mean, there were times where actually the reason that worked was like other districts in the county, people have other things going on. So like if there's somebody who has like, bond revenue or something, there's literal cash at the county that's even available to do that. If no other agency in the county is in a good position and everybody's getting hit at the same time, that's not necessarily an option either. And then that's where districts get into, tough situations, having to go to the market to borrow, and that costs a lot. So ultimately, my goal would always be to be able to weather any kind of recession or downturn without having to pay to borrow money. Because ultimately that just sets you back farther and farther, so.
So the question I have with respect to approving the budget tonight, is, admittedly, it's not entirely accurate because the contractual obligations that we are going to enter into with the two bargaining units are not reflected in this budget.
That is correct. And so what happens ultimately is that we bring the public disclosure forward that shows what an impact to the budget would be if you were to approve the settlements. And presuming the board then approves those, we have a certain period of time to incorporate any of those changes into the budget. And so then, that becomes available to the public if they want to see the final document. And of course, that first interim, it's already incorporated at that point.
So essentially, if we approve this tonight, we're approving an interim budget.
Yes, I mean, I would say it's just a fluke that we happen to know we have this settlement that's pending as well. I mean, really that can happen at any point during a school year. I mean, we know there's times where districts haven't completed that until midway through the year it impacts, in which case you're doing retros. But in any of those circumstances, we're basing this approval on the currently approved and known factors. And then you guys have the ability throughout the year to approve further things. We then incorporate them into the budget.
So I'm still
And
trying
we
to-
knew this at negotiations. So when Nikki and I talk in negotiations, we already know this. And so she always gives me the plus. Not that, there's no minus involved when we have this conversation, it's all add. But she tells me the additional add and we talk about where we're at and how far we can go.
One of the
Where those
things,
impacts will be, yes.
yeah, and one of the things for me from a technical standpoint is that, after AB 1200 came into place, which is why we have to do the public disclosures, it involved other public agencies, getting into hot water because they agreed to things they couldn't afford and didn't disclose that to taxpayers until it was kind of too late to do anything about it. So there's very specific requirements now that we have to go through, and this public disclosure is part of that. And because it's so prescribed, it's like I have to show what is the budget before the change, what is the change, what is the budget after the change. And so if I roll all of those known changes into this document, then I have to still go and do the public disclosure, and I have to back all of it out, do that whole process. So it's nice for me to have this as a starting point. It's kind of a logical progression.
Okay. So
So,
motion to approve?
I just want to say, I'm still sort of new, trying to understand budgets and everything. But so is it unusual projecting out 3 years to be in deficit spending, or are all projections?
It is not unusual, no. I mean, certainly in our district over the last several years, a lot of our conversations have centered around our deficit spending. It is something that we've been monitoring, but we've been very intentional. Mark had come in and had a lot of educational goals that he was trying to achieve, and so we've been building certain programs and doing those things, and now we've got some good things in place. And for instance, as vacancies come open, the discussions are like, okay, should we fill this? Is there some other way we can work around it? We are analyzing every time like how that can fit into the budget. And so ultimately, I mean, really doing the multi-year projection is another outcome from like what I was talking about before, other agencies getting into trouble. You're never going to reach that exact spot because things will change. This is a snapshot of our assumptions as we know them now. If we were not to make any other changes or course correct, but by projecting out this far, it allows us to know what that would look like if we continued on and on and on, and take the moment to say, okay, where can we course correct and prevent ourselves from maybe getting there if that's not where we want to be. So, I mean, we've had, as I said earlier, like when we've done earlier projections for 1920, we were showing a deficit, but we have made some changes to avoid having that, yeah.
Like we talked before, I made some changes, some staffing things, used some grant stuff to take out what was our structural deficit. Now, we're gonna create more deficit because we just settled a contract. But I had to take out some of that to make what we're gonna add to the deficit work. And so this assumes that we're not getting any more money from the state than we got this year, because that's all we know.
Right.
Well, I mean, it shows some higher amount based on what their current projection would be for COLAs, because the only increase we would get would be COLA or if our enrollment goes up, but we're not showing any projection that seems to indicate our enrollment will go up at the moment. So for us, COLA is going to be the only real increases, and that's honestly a real shot in the dark. Like there's no way to really know that until we're at this time for the following year, but it's our best guess at the moment.
When I first got on the board, the multi-year projections were very similar in terms of deficit spending each year, which concerned me greatly from a budget standpoint, but I've become a little less concerned. I use it as a basically a cautionary point so that I can base decisions and discussions with Mark about where we're headed with the budget in the future. I don't look at it as something set in stone by any stretch of the imagination.
And I have to say, I probably went through a similar process of having to desensitize to that a bit, because I also, if I see those parentheses, just naturally become a little nervous. It's my job. But ultimately, I think that it can be very different, depending on your leadership. And so if I personally am doing this work and I have leadership that is willing to use this as a tool and make the course corrections that will keep us on a good trajectory, then this is not a bad place to be. It's if you have leadership that is not willing to make any changes or fails to do so in time, and you end up in that place that you don't want to be, then you have problems.
Or if you believe the state's magically gonna give us a lot more money than what we got last year.
Well, never in all the years that I've been involved in school or school district things like this has the third-year projection been correct anyway.
Right, it would be
Never, ever
impossible
is.
for us.
Yeah.
And there's,
And I'm not saying that it's a mistake. I'm
No,
just
it's
saying it never takes into account any of the changes, any of anything, and it's almost silly to have it there unless you're going to use it as some sort of precautionary tool.
Yeah,
It certainly isn't correct.
there's in every given year too, there's aspects of our budget that are literally impossible to predict. We can do our salary projections with fairly good certainty, because once a person is in that position, we know where they are on the salary schedule, we know what the benefit impact is. But then there's huge areas such as our substitute costs or extra duty costs, or those are, we don't know if somebody's gonna be out on maternity leave, or if we'll have a long-term vacancy we have to fill, or, if there's things that you can't know, but we do our best to make room for them in the budget and allow for the possibility of those things, because they could certainly happen.
We planned for an SRO the entire year last year.
Yeah, I think that went in and out of the LCAP about 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we weren't able to get that in place until quite a bit later.
And I want to let you know that I don't know if most people know this, but I don't even have the Escape software we use for business on my computer, intentionally. I don't even have a login to Escape, because I don't want that. Because that's how Nikki and I separate duties. If I was logging into Escape, then I'm looking at data and I'm gonna go, well, hey, I saw this. We don't operate that way. We operate kind of independently, but work collaboratively. Because I think it's a mistake for the superintendent to be over-involved in looking at budgets and micromanaging that, because that's not my role. And I have faith that she does a great job and has been doing a great job, and we're in a good position because of that. She'll say, we can afford this, we can't afford this. Should I do this now? Should we wait till July? We have those conversations like daily.
I'd entertain a motion to approve the budget.
I'll move to approve the budget.
Is there a second?
Yes. I'll second.
Paul, a second?
Yes.
Very good. Any further discussion on the budget? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I believe that's unanimous. Okay, we have some resolutions now.
I think
we gotta go do FA.
this is our
Yeah, sorry,
additions,
FA.
which is really an extension of our discussions already. Several years ago, the state passed some legislation related
Just one
to
page.
fund
Just one page.
balances, and sort of referred to as the reserve cap. They're coming around over there.
I'll give you mine. I know where to go.
So just like the other document here, this is going to change.
Yes, because this is literally tied to our multi-year projection.
Right.
And really what the purpose of this document is that The state has designated the minimum reserve that our district our size must hold, which we already talked about, is 3%. And they have asked districts to discuss if they have over and above that 3%, what else, they are holding, what are the purposes, and, discuss the planning around those things. And so this is that substantiation of our reserve. So really, this just kind of gives you that component of the budget in detail here. So it ultimately, some of the components that we have in our fund balance are, we always have a non-spendable, because we have a revolving fund. So that's kept in place for miscellaneous things that need to be resolved quickly, so it's only $2,500. We have restricted balance, so a lot of times when we're looking and discussing our fund balance, we tend to be looking at the unrestricted side. The restricted side of the budget, those funds are generally tied to very specific programs. It's the Medi-Cal funds or various things like that. So we definitely kind of pull those out before looking at what is left, because those funds, the board could not decide they would want to use those for some other purpose than what the program designates. We also have part of our balances which are assigned, and so for us, this is primarily related to our supplemental concentration grant. So it is hard for me to know what that revenue is going to be. That moves up and down throughout the year. We have budget adoption, first, second interim. The calculator changes, and we don't know until really the end of the year what that actually is. So I do always leave a little bit of a buffer there to allow for the fact that that could dip, and we have committed expenditures there. The other thing that we know going into this budget year is that we have settlements already on the table here that we're going to be incorporating. So I definitely make sure to leave room for that, so we know those expenses are going to expand as we go into first interim. And then the reserve for economic uncertainty, what I have listed here is 6%. That is what we've been showing as our official reserve for economic uncertainty. So we have more than that amount, but that is just what we've consistently over the last several years been using. The board can take action to set some other amount and direct me to use another amount, but since we don't have a formal policy on that, 6% is what I've been using. And then you can see that after all those other things are factored in, the unassigned balance is the $2,128,000. That was, we kind of discussed earlier in the meeting. And you can see by the end of the third year, if all the things come into play that we've looked at, that goes down quite a bit with the deficit spending. So reasons that we have these fund balances are things we've already discussed. We've got expenses that are increasing that we have very little control over, such as minimum wage increases. Stores and PERS do continue to climb, although, as we discussed at the last meeting, the governor has taken action with his budget proposals, and it seems that the legislature is in agreement that they use some funds to buy that down a little bit. But they're still very high and continue to grow every year. We are not receiving any additional funding to cover those increases. Additionally, we can see that up until this last year, the revenue each year was growing at a faster rate than the COLA, because they were doing what they call gap funding. So they had the LCAP target funding for school districts, and each year they were attempting to move districts closer to that target. We've reached that target, so as we go forward, unless the legislature were to set a higher target, we will only receive COLA as increases. So, this year they're projecting 3.26. A year or two ago, we had a 0% COLA. We just so happened to also have gap funding, so we didn't feel it as much. But now going forward, if that were to happen, we would certainly feel the impact as our expenses grow each year. And if we were to have a year without revenue growth, that could be a real difficulty for us. We also have a lot of other needs around the district that we discuss all the time, maintenance issues that come up. We've done some great progress on vehicle replacement, but we know there are still needs out there on vehicle replacement in the district. Technology is, a big component for us now, and we've done a great job deploying a lot of technology. But we need to keep in mind that you have to stay on top of that cycle and replenishing it. So there's just a lot of things in the wings that we don't have, a lot of control over that we need to be prepared for. So that is, why we are trying to be conscientious about our fund balance reserve.
Entertain a motion to approve the 2019-20 budget reserve substantiation.
I'll motion.
A second.
Okay, any further discussion? Are you kind of clear on what we're doing?
There's a typo in your second to last. It says replenishment, and that's a word I'm not
thank you.
familiar with. Before you send it off.
You'll just sell,
anyway.
the Excel files are not as great with spell check as the Word document is.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And now we are to
G.
G. Approval of resolution number 2018-19, Education Protection Act.
And I have the plan that goes with that. So this is something that we do every year. When we're doing our budget, we show what our plan is for the year. When we're closing out the prior year, we show what actually happened.
Yep.
This is tied to some legislation that happened, I want to say in like 2013 or so.
2012?
2012. In which districts had gotten some cuts to their funding, but some of that funding was restored through the use of sales tax and some components of personal income tax. That when that sort of restored the funding to the districts, came with strings attached, and that was that it not be used for administrative costs. So we have to show our plan of what are we doing with those funds. I mean, this is really just a component of our total LCFF calculator funding. But we have to say, look, we're not using it for administrative costs, and we do what most all districts do, and we put it into teacher salaries. So for 1920, we are, oh, and there is another typo, I got the wrong date on there. It should be through June 30th, 2019, not through 18. 2,155,335 is our current projection for what that funding will be and how much we will put towards teacher salaries.
Okay. Motion to approve. And this is a resolution. I need a motion and a second.
I move that we approve.
I'll second it.
Okay.
This
And
is in addition to the general fund, right?
This is part of our general fund.
Oh, so it's already been put into it.
Yes.
Yes, it's part of our budget and it's already factored in. Ultimately, like when they calculate our LCFF revenue, there's components of that. So it's like, here's your total amount, part of it's your supplemental concentration, part of it's the EPA, part of it's your transportation.
Trina, is this a roll call vote?
Yes.
Yes, they all will be.
So we'll call for the vote. Ms. Nunez?
Yes, or I, or
Ms.
whatever.
King?
Aye.
Aye. Chavez? Myself, aye. Ms.
Aye.
Colvin? Aye. Unanimous?
The rest of my year.
And item H, approval of resolution 1819-20, authorization for 2018-19 interfund temporary cash transfers.
So the next several resolutions are all things that we do annually. And they are just authorizations from the board to allow me to do the accounting that I need to do. We talked about for managing cash balances, so if we have to do any inter-fund borrowing, or if I need to have a temporary borrowing at June 30th in order to close a particular fund without a negative balance. And it also allows me to do all of the journal entries throughout next year that I need to do to our account. So that's sort of a summary of all of them, if you want me to go into each one in detail.
I'm comfortable with what you just did. So, motion to approve item H.
I move we approve.
Second.
I'll second.
And for item H, Ms. Munoz,
Aye.
King,
Aye.
Chavez,
Aye.
Olds, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Item I, approval of resolution 1819-21, authorization for 2018-19 year-end transfers. Any discussion?
It's just a little safety precaution that you're doing this. I mean, with
Some
our
of them-
reserve, we shouldn't have
Some
a
of
need,
them
right?
are to allow me to do like this one is like, I need to do the transfer to book a contribution. Or if
Right.
I'm moving an indirect cost over, it's like when I'm closing the books, and those are things you guys have generally budgeted for in here, it's just to approve the actual movement of the money.
Yeah, okay. You just don't have anything right at this minute that you're projecting you need to do it. It's more as a safety
Well,
precaution, right?
for regular transfers, I do, like I said, we do a contribution into our special ed, but that's, I mean,
Sorry about that.
Okay. So I need a motion and a second for item K.
I can move that we do item K, resolution 218-19.
And seconded by,
I'll second it.
okay. Any further discussion? We don't want to give the money back to the state. So call for the vote.
Aye.
Paula?
Aye.
Jean?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Alex? Aye.
Aye.
Robert? So we're done with the resolutions. We're moving on to item L, approval of Con App 2019-20 application for funding.
we're gonna have to strike that one. In the rush to get this stuff, I neglected to bring that with, so I think we will have to put that in with our special meeting.
Okay. Pull item L.
That's asking the feds for money.
You should always ask for it.
We're California, and that's probably not.
We may not
have to
get
vote
it,
for
but we
it.
should always ask.
That worked for us
At
with
least
our
at this
current
point,
president.
they're obligated to give this to us, but depends on how much we,
Aggravate the man at the top.
there you go.
Okay, M, approval of superintendent's performance salary augmentation.
No, that's,
Are we going to hold that till after our, at the next meeting, or is that something we have to do now?
Is it tied to your raises already? No, you don't have to.
I think, because I think we were going to do your eval at the next meeting.
Oh, okay, that's what those words were.
Yes.
And I had no action taken.
We originally planned on
so-
doing it tonight,
So then
but we weren't quite prepared for during the closed session.
okay, so, all right, so we'll table that.
So we'll table that one until next meeting as well. And item N, approval of provisional internship for Amber Kingray, educational specialist, moderate to severe elementary teacher, certificated staff.
So this is the one that we did last week, but the wording was, it didn't say moderate to severe, I think it said mild to moderate, so
Gotcha.
it's just a correction.
I'll entertain a motion. to
Did it
approve.
need to say the state, or that she was doing the preschool one and not elementary? Because I know she's gonna do the preschool.
I don't think that
No.
the credential distinguishes
Okay.
on the
No, it
level, it
wasn't
just
that,
does
it was the
level of.
disability.
Okay.
but she will be in
Move
the
we
preschool.
approve.
as
She
long as
is.
she's got what-
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay. Public comments for items not on the agenda. Public comments? What? I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, before we do we have a date for the next meeting, or do we just?
It's gonna be me.
I'm gonna have,
Oh,
I don't wanna pick it and then we're not, I don't know how long the public disclosure, that's kind of a new thing for me.
okay.
I'm not used to that, so.
Yeah, we need to confirm first. Do we have a second?
Do we have a first and a second for
I move
adjournment?
we adjourn.
I second it.
We have to figure out when we can do it, and as soon as we can do it, I'll let you know, because I think the idea is to get it done as soon as we can.
All in favor? Aye. Thanks, everybody.